Chapter 3275. This time, the entire monastery, even the high monks and abbots who heard the news were confused. They didn't know why the bodhisattva left in a huff. When a group of monks gathered the words written in the Buddha's heart together, they formed a nondescript poem. Oh, what poem? Xiaohua was very interested. Sweeping the floor, afraid of hurting the lives of ants, cherishing moths, covering the lamp with gauze. Human life is hard to be heavier than moths. Buddha's heart is lighter than white porridge. If not for the ethereal immortal robe, beggars would have lost their lives in front of Buddha. This time, everyone understood that it was the matter of giving porridge. When the abbot asked the monk who gave the porridge, his face unconsciously turned ashen, and all the monks present were sad. Fu Jiwen laughed. The specific outcome of the matter was not spread out, but the name Ethereal Immortal Robe was famous in the hidden immortal continent for a while. This ethereal immortal robe was originally not in the top 10 imperial artifacts, but after this matter, it was included in the list. Xiaohua clapped. It seems that every imperial artifact has a thought-provoking story. However, young Master Fu, do you know? In this world, there are people who give porridge every day for decades. Although he is often hungry, he has never stopped. How is that possible? Fu Jiwen frowned. Which temple's high monk is this? I hope fellow Taoist Xiao can enlighten me. When I have time, I will pay him a visit. Ha ha ha, Xiaohua laughed. He seemed to be in an extremely good mood. It's not a temple, and it doesn't need a time. It's the old Taoist from the Seven Suns Temple in Bronze Pillar Country. Taoist sect. Fu Jiwen was somewhat shocked. Xiaohua looked at the auction downstairs. Under Yu Linfeng's persuasion, the Crimson Dragon hairbrush had already been sold for a good price, and now he had bid for several rare items from the hidden immortal continent. Looking at Yu Linfeng's hand grabbing, it seemed like another imperial artifact flew out. Xiaohua said indifferently, not only does the hidden immortal continent have mystical imperial artifacts, it also has the Taoist sect's loyalty. If young Master Fu has time, you might as well go take a look. You also have Taoist cultivation. This might be useful for your persistence. Indeed. Fu Jiwen nodded. In my eyes, most of the Taoist sects are deceitful and cunning people. It's rare to see someone as magnanimous as fellow Taoist Xiao, and I've never seen such a tenacious and kind person. After daybreak, I will definitely pay a visit to this senior and seek his advice on cultivation. You will be disappointed. Xiaohua shook his head. This Taoist priest has no cultivation at all. Fu Jiwen nodded slightly, and a look of admiration appeared on his face. If it weren't for the persistence in your heart, if it weren't for the great kindness in your heart, you wouldn't have been able to persist like this. With such people, the Tao sect can prosper. Yes, I think so too. Only people like Master Daoshan are the backbone of our Tao sect. Xiaohua sighed. They are the ones who are supporting our Tao sect when our Tao sect is in decline. Master Daoshan. I will remember it. Fu Jiwen nodded. At this moment, Yu Linfeng's voice rose again. Previously, the bidding for the Crimson Dragon hair set off a small climax. Then he bid for some rare items. Although these items couldn't be compared to the Crimson Dragon hair, they were still very popular. The atmosphere of the entire auction was maintained at a relatively high level. However, following the appearance of a few rare items, the atmosphere began to drop. Yu Linfeng was naturally an expert in this field. He immediately waved his hand, and a ball of extremely tragic brilliance flew out from the ball of light of the hidden immortal continent. It landed in front of him, and he said loudly, "Fellow Taoists, can you guess what this item is? If any of you can guess it, I will make the decision and reduce the amount of primordial stones during the transaction." One of the 10 great imperial artifacts. Just as Yu Linfeng's voice fell, an old voice sounded. Yu Linfeng smiled bitterly. "Fellow Taoist, you really think too highly of my Zhai Xinglu. Just now, I already said that my Zhai Xinglu has never bid for the 10 great imperial artifacts." Fellow Taoist Yu, at this moment, another voice sounded from the slightly chaotic clamor. "This brilliance looks very strange. It doesn't look like the luster of an imperial artifact, nor does it look like the righteousness of a scroll. But this light is filled with a kind of indescribable brightness." Even my clear eyes technique is unbearable under this brilliance. This really makes me puzzled. If my guess is correct, this isn't a rare item of my hidden immortal continent. No, that's not right. If it isn't a rare item of my hidden immortal continent, how can it be taken out from the ball of light of the hidden immortal continent? Seeing that his goal was achieved, Yu Linfeng didn't dare to let everyone guess anymore. He hurriedly said with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, what you said is reasonable. However, you didn't completely guess. This item is naturally something that my hidden immortal continent's Confucian sect uses." Saying this, Yu Linfeng opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of clear air. The clear air landed on the bright ball of light, and it was like a layer of thin clouds covering the ball of light. At this moment, everyone could clearly see that the ball of light was actually a block of ink. However, it was just a block of ink that was 2 inches wide and 3 inches long. In addition to the dazzling brilliance, the surface of the ink block was very smooth. Faintly, there were some small lines on the surface. Those lines were slightly fine, and there was a faint scarlet color. Many cultivators with high clear eyes technique could already see that these lines were some blood vessels. However, it was precisely the blood vessels within these lines that emitted a dazzling light that caused the cultivators who were staring at the ink stick to feel waves of dizziness. Amidst this dizziness, another strange demonic beast was revealed. Light beast. A voice cried out. "I understand. This is blood ink refined from the light beast's light blood." Yes. Hearing this, Yu Linfeng clapped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist is right. This blood ink is refined from the extremely rare light beast's blood essence in the Thousand Devils Sacred Realm. It is most suitable for us Confucian cultivators to make scrolls. Of course, this blood ink can only be used by seniors above the level of literature master. Fellow Taoists below the level of literature master must not try it. In particular, seniors who have reached the level of great grandmaster can use this blood ink to write scrolls that have the power of literature saints." A figure not far from Yu Linfeng cried out in shock. How is it so powerful?" "Ha ha ha, that's not all." Without waiting for this person to finish speaking, another voice called out, "Since this blood ink is mixed with the light beast's blood essence, it doesn't need to be written into a scroll. As long as you hold it in your hand, not only will ordinary demonic beasts not dare to approach you, you can even wander around in the middle of the night. All the evil spirits and ghosts won't dare to approach you." Also across from Xiaohua, another person called out, "With this blood ink on your writing desk, your reading will be like the help of a god. If you practice qi, it will be twice the result with half the effort." Fellow Taoist, what's the starting price for this item? While several people were showing off their knowledge, someone had already asked eagerly. Not only was Yu Linfeng overjoyed, he hastily reported the starting price for this blood ink refined from the light beast's blood essence. On the 3rd floor, Xiaohua smiled and pointed his hand, saying, "Young Master Fu, you just said that the Crimson Dragon hair brush was similar to my Taoist magic tool talisman brush. Now that this blood ink has appeared, isn't it the same as my Taoist spirit talisman refining? Both use the spirit beast's blood essence, and use magic to draw talisman charms?" "Hee, that's right," Fu Jiwen said with a smile. "A true scroll doesn't need the help of any spirit beast's blood essence, nor does it need the help of a special imperial tool. That so-called divine brush is nothing more than an accessory. This one has only heard of this kind of scroll, and this kind of inscription can only be written by seniors at the level of literature saints. As for the rest, they are all at a disadvantage. Let them bid. Left and right. Oh, young Master Fu, if you like something you can say it." "This one only came to take a look. I don't plan on bidding for anything," Xiaohua said with a smile. Fu Jiwen hastily waved his hand and said, "This one's needs have already been met. I have no more requests. There's no need to mention this matter again." Up to you. Xiaohua smiled. That bone was very useful to him. Xiaohua always felt that a thunder amplifying wood wasn't enough to express his gratitude, so he said this. Fu Jiwen glanced at the enthusiastic bidding. He said with a smile, "Just now, this one was talking about the misty like immortal robe, the 9th of the 10 great imperial tools. Above the misty like immortal robe is the myriad miles mountain and rivers fan. Actually, When it comes to this myriad miles mountain and rivers fan, this one feels that rather than calling it a Confucian cultivator's imperial tool, it would be better to call it a Taoist magic tool. Oh, Xiaohua raised his eyebrows. This imperial tool is different from other imperial tools. Yes. Fu Jiwen nodded. It is said that this myriad miles mountain and rivers fan's original form is a Taoist magic tool called the Mountain and Rivers Map. However, this magic tool was damaged during a fight, and it was extremely serious. Taoist magic tools were unable to repair it, so it was abandoned. Later on, a Confucian great tool master obtained this item and used Confucian magic tools to seal a strand of dragon qi from the 9 continents into it, using the dragon qi to nourish the damaged magic tool. After more than 1,000 years, it was completely repaired. When this myriad miles mountain and rivers fan is waved, it has the weight of 10,000 miles of mountains and rivers, and it also has the appearance of a majestic dragon qi. Without great luck and the strength of dragons and elephants, it is extremely difficult to resist. Therefore, it is ranked above the misty like immortal robe. Luck? Xiaohua frowned and asked, "What is luck?" What young Master Fu said about the weight of mountains and rivers, the strength of dragons and elephants, this one can understand, but this majestic dragon qi, great luck, this one can't understand. Fu Jiwen smiled faintly and said, "Luck is very illusory. If we look at it in a big way, it is the direction of all things in the world. For example, Confucian cultivators, Buddhist sects and Taoist sects, whoever can occupy great luck will be able to prosper and develop. In the ancient times, the struggle between Buddhism and Confucianism was a struggle for luck. If Taoist sects' luck was occupied by Buddhism and Confucianism, they would reach a dead end and could only perish and descend into desolation. If we look at it in a big way, it is the development of a country and a family. If a country obtains luck, it will prosper, and the country's strength will be strong. If a family obtains luck, it will flourish, and its descendants will flourish, lasting for thousands of generations. If we look at it in a small way, if a person obtains luck, he will definitely win every bet, and disaster will become auspicious. Chapter 3276. His Xiaohua slightly inhaled a breath of cold air. Although Fu Jiwen said it very simply, it was also easy to understand. Doesn't the Tao sect have auspicious talismans? Didn't I also get the Phoenix Jade talisman? It seems like I can inexplicably turn misfortunes into blessings many times. Isn't this what Fu Jiwen said about luck? Because luck is very complicated, Confucian cultivators even have specialized cultivators to research this technique. Unfortunately, I am very unfamiliar with this. Actually, most people only heard about it from hearsay. It is impossible for them to know the details. Fu Jiwen said again. Moreover, it is said that dragon qi and luck are closely related. On the hidden immortal continent, where there are dragon veins, there will be dragon qi, and where there is dragon qi, the luck will be especially vigorous. Therefore, only people with great luck can resist the dragon qi on the fan of 1,000 miles of mountains and rivers. Hearing this, Xiaohua laughed. If this is true, then wouldn't the dragon kings of the 4 seas become the rulers of the 3 continents? Wouldn't the dragon palaces of the 4 seas become the place with the most abundant luck in this world? Fellow Xiao is wrong. Dragon qi, dragon veins and dragon race are not too related. Dragon veins are born from luck. It is just borrowing the dragon shape, and the dragon race themselves do not have luck. Fu Jiwen also said with a smile. If it is as fellow Xiao thinks, the place with the most abundant luck is Dragon Island. That dragon palaces of the 4 seas are only part of Dragon Island, suppressing the 4 seas. Dragon Island is the place where the dragon race resides. Speaking of dragon palaces, Xiaohua asked again. Dragon Island is probably the same as the immortal palaces. No one knows where it is? Yes, that is exactly the case. Fu Jiwen nodded. A trace of longing appeared in his eyes. No matter if it is the immortal palaces, Dragon Island, Great Lightning Tune Temple or Great Sage Temple, they are all only heard of but not seen. Let's not talk about this anymore, Xiaohua asked. Let's talk about the 10 great imperial equipment. Yes, Fu Jiwen said with a smile. This imperial equipment ranked 7th is a wonderful item. It is called Beauty Jade. Beauty Jade? Xiaohua reached out his hand and scratched his chin a few times. As if he understood, he said with a smile, "Young Master Fu means all male cultivators should like it." "Ha ha ha," Fujiwen said. "It is said to be so. But I'm afraid that only the man who actually obtained the beauty jade would know the specific benefits, right? Sweat, this kind of thing can also be called a imperial equipment." After Xiaohua seemed to understand, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fujiwen explained again, "Since fellow Taoist Xiao has thought of one of the layers, I'm sure you also understand that when this jade of beauty is used, it can transform into a frightening heavenly maiden. It's extremely easy for people with unstable mental states to fall into the trap. Lust is the first blade." Xiaohua sighs and says, "The power of this color is even heavier than the power of dragons and elephants, and even heavier than our mountains and rivers. No wonder this jade beauty is ranked above the fan of mountains and rivers." That's right. There are several times more male cultivators than female cultivators in this world. It's very difficult to escape from this jade beauty. What about the 6th-ranked imperial equipment? Xiaohua pursed his lips and smiled. This Xiao is very curious as to which imperial equipment can suppress the beauty jade. To be able to suppress the beauty jade, it's naturally the words that have existed since time immemorial and run through the past and present. It can turn a woman into a skeleton. Fujiwen says with a smile. Without words, without sentences, without text, those beauties can only be a lump of meat, a skeleton. After 100 years, who can still remember them? Inscriptions? It should be said that the collection of inscriptions and scrolls is completed, Fujiwen nods. This imperial equipment is called the 10,000-word book. According to legend, it was written by the earliest 9,999 inscriptions born in the world in ancient times. When the 10,000-word book is used, every word can reach the stars. Every word can disturb heaven and earth. It can be said that every word is a gem, every word is heavy, every word is ancient. Under this 10,000-word book, even if the sage of literature can reach the Milky Way, he will still be suppressed by these words. Not even a trace of noble spirit will leak out. 9,999 inscriptions? Xiaohua frowned. Why not 10,000? It is said that when the 10,000th inscription was created, heaven and earth changed colors, gods and devils wept, mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. Thus, the last inscription A was merged with heaven and earth, and no one can see it. Of course, if anyone can see this inscription A, their body will immediately become a sage. Hearing this, Xiaohua can't help but secretly curl his lips. Isn't this the Soul Cultivator's green seal text? Xiaohua clearly knows what the inscription A looks like. Xiaohua is even more clear about the power of the green seal text. In this world, besides the green seal text, how can there be 9,999 inscriptions A with the same power? Isn't this the legendary inscription A? Oh, young Master Fu, please wait a moment. Just as Xiaohua curls his lips and Fujiwen is about to speak, Xiaohua suddenly waves his hand and says. Fujiwen is stunned, but looking at the auction downstairs he immediately understands. Just as the two are talking, Yu Linfeng has already bid for the blood ink. The one who obtained it is the person who bid for the thunder amplifying wood with Xiaohua. After the blood ink, he bid for a few more rare items. Now on the lacquer plate in front of Yu Linfeng is a jade eye. Yu Linfeng is also speaking in a loud voice. Fellow immortals, after bidding for some rare items of the hidden immortal continent, let's take a break for a while. Now there are a few interesting items. Although they have nothing to do with us Confucian cultivators. If any of you are good at both, you can use a small amount of primeval stones to bid for them. This jade eye in front of me records a Taoist technique called wind and cloud spell. Just as Yu Linfeng says this, an impatient person everywhere interrupts him. A cold voice says, Fellow immortal you, our 3 continents have a law. No one can sell Taoist techniques. What are you doing? Aren't you afraid that Zhaixing Lu will be destroyed by the immortal palace? My Zhaixing Lu has always been enforcing the law. How can we violate the iron law of the 3 continents? Yu Linfeng says with a smile. In order to contain the great enemy of us Confucian cultivators, the immortal palace prohibits the sale of Taoist techniques. However, It is only limited to low-level and basic techniques. As for high-level techniques, they don't really care. As for fellow immortals, there are people with peerless aptitudes. I'm afraid many of you also have Taoist cultivation, right? My Zhai Xing Lu's technique is only a technique between the 3 levels of essence energy. It should be a Taoist golden core technique, but it is not prohibited by the Immortal Palace. Hearing this, Fujiwen looks at the star-shaped Xiaohua and understands something. He knows that Xiaohua wants to bid for this item. Oh my, a Taoist technique of the 3 levels of essence energy. That voice smacks his lips and says, "This thing must cost a lot of primeval stones, right?" Not much, not much. 1 top-grade primeval stone. Yu Linfeng waves his hand and says, "Damn, 1 top-grade primeval stone." That voice seems to want to jump up from below. This is too expensive. How could anyone want it? Yu Linfeng shrugs his shoulders and slightly waves the folding fan in his hand. With a calm appearance he says, "There's no other way, it's a rare item worth hoarding. This is the price. This is a technique. Unlike some imperial tool or scroll, it can be passed down forever. Moreover, in the eyes of fellow immortals, it may be worthless, but in the eyes of others, it may be a priceless treasure. 1 top-grade primeval stone." Without waiting for Yu Linfeng to finish speaking, someone not far away called out a price. Oh. Xiaohua was greatly surprised. He looked downstairs. Needless to say, this person must have a Taoist cultivation base. Moreover, he must have already reached the peak of foundation establishment, or even the early Jindan stage. Only then would he come to the auction to bid for this Jindan cultivation method. Good, this fellow immortal bids 1 top-grade primeval stone. Yu Linfeng raises his eyebrows and calls out in a slightly exaggerated manner, "Is there anyone else bidding?" Hee, I'm afraid 1 top-grade primeval stone is enough to close the deal. Besides Xiaohua, Fujiwen says with a smile, even fellow Taoist Xiao wouldn't spend a few top-grade primeval stones to compete with a Taoist disciple for this golden core technique, right? Xiaohua nods. Indeed. Now that the Taoist sects are in decline, any Taoist cultivator who has some sense of the big picture wouldn't kill each other like this. Sure enough, after this cultivator speaks, although the entire auction is somewhat noisy, no one bids against him. If no one bids, this item will be this fellow immortal's. Yu Linfeng raises his folding fan, and is about to drop it. Wait, at this moment, the person on the 3rd floor opposite Xiaohua speaks again. I'll add 10 top-grade primeval stones. Oh. This is... Not only is Xiaohua baffled, even Fujiwen raises his eyebrows and looks at the opposite building with some surprise. After all, although the opposite side has only bid twice, the items they bid for each time are completely unrelated to the Taoist sects. One is the Thunder Amplification Wood, the other is the Light Beast Blood Ink. How could they bid again for a golden core technique? Could it be a diversion? This person in front of us is also a Taoist cultivator? Xiaohua seems to understand something. His goal is the same as mine, also a Taoist treasure? If so, just now, I was too impetuous. I thought this person was that Duanmu. That's not right. Just as he thinks up to here, Xiaohua seems to have thought of something again, and a trace of a smile hangs at the corner of his mouth. Fuck, just now from that tone, I can only guess with 30% certainty that that person is young Master Duanmu. But now that this guy opened his mouth to bid for this Taoist sex technique, I'm afraid I'm 70% sure that this person is young Master Duanmu. The person who bid for the Thunder Amplification Wood with me just now is really a Taoist cultivator? Fujiwen at the side shifts his gaze from outside and looks at Xiaohua. After all, the Taoist sex methods are unique and can use this Thunder Amplification Wood in many places. Would a Taoist sect disciple be very familiar with this star-picking tower's manager? Xiaohua smiles faintly. Fujiwen, however, says with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, I'm not too sure about your cultivation, but I reckon you should be the kind of cultivator who secludes himself from the world and only cultivates Taoist sex techniques, not involving yourself in other things." Fellow Taoist also doesn't know, in this hidden immortal continent, no, it should be the 3 continents. Although many cultivators don't dare to say that they are good at both sects, There are often some Confucian cultivators who have Taoist divine abilities and Buddhist sects who have Confucian cultivators' divine abilities. The person bidding may not be a true Taoist sect cultivator, but he may also have Taoist divine abilities. Even if this kind of person has some connection with Star Picking Tower, it's also normal. Chapter 3277. Xiaohua had already told Fu Jiwen about his situation. Now that he had asked him so many seemingly ordinary things, Fu Jiwen's explanation was also normal. Especially since Fu Jiwen didn't know about his conflict with Duanmu Gongzi. Of course he didn't think as much as he did. Let's wait and see. Xiaohua didn't explain and only responded. Downstairs, in this short moment, dozens of high-grade primeval stones had already been added. Finally, the cultivator downstairs helplessly withdrew. Clearly he was somewhat embarrassed. Good, this wind and cloud art will go to this. Yulinfeng waved his hand. Just as he was about to settle, Xiaohua raised his voice again. 2 top-grade primeval stones. Boom! As soon as these words were spoken, the entire auction was bustling with activity again. Obviously, the first wave of the thunder amplifying wood was caused by Xiaohua and the person opposite him. Now this inconspicuous jade eyes had successfully provoked a fight between the two. Add 10 high-grade primeval stones. The voice from the opposite side was extremely fast. It was a bit faster than the previous bid with the cultivator downstairs. And this voice, when heard by Xiaohua's ears, actually carried a kind of relaxed, a kind of excitement. It really is this guy. Xiaohua's eyes slightly narrowed. That's right. Since Xiaohua could guess that the person opposite him was Duanmu Gongzi, how could Duanmu Gongzi not guess that it was Xiaohua here? Not to mention that Duanmu Gongzi had already met several distinguished guests on the 3rd floor before entering the balcony, just based on Duanmu Gongzi's words just now. As long as someone paid attention, they would be able to guess that the person on the balcony was Duanmu Gongzi. But Xiaohua still twisted his neck and competed with him. Who else could it be other than Xiaohua? Of course, it couldn't be ruled out that there were other cultivators who urgently needed the thunder-amplifying wood, and thus didn't care about Duanmu Gongzi's face. Therefore, Duanmu Gongzi was the same as Xiaohua, bidding with the cultivator downstairs in an uncertain situation. The purpose of this bidding wasn't the wind and cloud art, but Xiaohua's identity. Even the moment Duanmu Gongzi bid for the wind and cloud art, he already denied that Xiaohua was on the balcony and thought that the cultivator downstairs was Xiaohua. Of course, in this way, Duanmu Gongzi won the wind and cloud art and ruined Xiaohua's good thing. So Duanmu Gongzi was also happy. After all, it was only a top-grade primeval stone. Duanmu Gongzi could still afford to waste. Since Xiaohua understood the reason, why didn't he stand up to fight? There had already been conflicts left and right, so what was one more? Naturally, Xiaohua's shout had revealed his identity to young Master Duanmu at the same time. How could young Master Duanmu not be excited? 3 top-grade primordial stones. Xiaohua shouted again without hesitation. Fu Jiwen was greatly alarmed and said anxiously, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, although this cultivation method is rare, but it's really not worth 2 supreme-grade essence stones. Add another 10 upper-grade primordial stones." Young Master Duanmu also opened his mouth. Forget it at this moment. Xiaohua smiled and said loudly, "Just now this old man took advantage of this fellow immortal. This time, even though this old man really desires this jade eye, in order to make up for the injury I inflicted on fellow immortal, I'll give it to fellow immortal." Right after Xiaohua finished speaking, a furious roar rose, but it only lasted for a moment before the voice fell silent again. When it spoke again, there was no anger in it. "Then thank you, fellow Taoist." Hearing the word fellow Taoist, Xiaohua shrugged and said to Fu Jiwen with a smile, "See, you're indeed a fellow Taoist. This Xiao knows his mistake and corrects it. Can this be considered the greatest virtue?" Fu Jiwen naturally couldn't see Xiaohua's expression, but he stood up apologetically and cupped his hands, saying, "Alas, it's all my fault. I caused fellow Taoist Xiao to become enemies with this person." At this point, what did Fu Jiwen not understand? It's just that he thought it was his own matter that made things difficult for Xiaohua. It has nothing to do with you. Xiaohua waved his hand, indicating for Fu Jiwen to stand up. "If there's no accident, That person should be young Master Duanmu of the Duanmu family. This Xiao doesn't know his name, but when I entered Star-Picking Tower, this Xiao inadvertently had an unnecessary conflict with him. Even if this Xiao ignores him, he'll still remember this Xiao in his heart. There's no harm in letting him spend 3 supreme-grade primordial stones to deepen his impression. Seize Duanmu family. Xiao Hua said it casually, but Fu Jiwen gasped. The Duanmu family was truly a colossus to him. Ignore him. Xiao Hua waved his hand. He also doesn't know who this Xiao is. After tonight, we'll go our separate ways. Fu Jiwen looked at Xiao Hua's figure, bit his lips slightly, and said in a low voice, Fellow Taoist Xiao, the Duanmu family isn't an ordinary family. Even if fellow Taoist has the cultivation of 7th grade essence energy, I'm afraid you won't be able to confront them head-on. Oh, 7th grade essence energy? When Xiao Hua heard this, he unconsciously felt a little bitter in his mouth. 7th grade essence energy was the cultivation of body integration. Given 1,000 years, who knew if Xiao Hua could cultivate into body integration? However, Fu Jiwen hesitated again and said, the descendants of the Duanmu family are also divided into direct and side branches, and even partial branches. Not everyone with the surname Duanmu can't be provoked. To be able to participate in this kind of auction in Bronze Pillar Nation, they shouldn't be from the direct branch of the Duanmu family. Fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't need to be too worried. And this Xiao understands. Xiao Hua's voice regained its calmness. He already had a plan in his heart. This Duanmu family was like the Imperial Thunder sect. Although it was very big, but on the other hand, it also had a lot of disciples. This Duanmu young master's cultivation wasn't very high, but there were probably many disciples like him in the Duanmu family. There might not be any top cultivators who would stand up for some small matter for no reason. You better tell this Xiao what the 5th Imperial artifact is. Alright, Fu Jiwen saw that Xiao Hua was calm. Although he was a little anxious in his heart, he could only agree and sit down again. He said, the 5th Imperial artifact is the Divine Devil Chess. Divine Devil Chess? When Xiao Hua heard this, he frowned again. This, what chess? How did it become one of the top 10 Imperial artifacts? Fellow Taoist isn't the only one who is puzzled. Even I and many other cultivators don't understand. Fu Jiwen said absent-mindedly. It said that the reason why the Divine Devil Chess became one of the top 10 Imperial artifacts is because of the mystery of this Divine Devil Chess. No one has ever seen this Divine Devil Chess, and no one knows the use of this Divine Devil Chess. I have only heard that this Divine Devil Chess is a chess set that uses heaven and earth as the chessboard, and gods and devils as the chess pieces. Gods and devils? How is that possible? Xiao Hua snorted. He felt that this Confucian student was the best at making up nonsense. Everything that came out of their mouth was impossible. Gods and devils. How could they be chess pieces? If gods and devils were chess pieces, who would be able to control gods and devils? That's right. Fu Jiwen withdrew the trace of worry in his eyes and said with a smile, that's right. However, I have also heard of some legends that are related to this Divine Devil Chess. Xiao Hua looked downstairs. The auction had started again. Yu Linfeng actually took out some Dao sect talisman crafting and alchemy techniques to bid. These talisman crafting and alchemy techniques were obviously more popular than golden core cultivation techniques. Many cultivators began to bid. Of course, the price of these secret techniques was far less than the golden core cultivation techniques. Suddenly, Xiao Hua's heart moved, and he secretly said, damn it, I forgot. I have now reached the peak of golden core stage. Although I still don't have any signs of condensing a nascent soul, and I don't know how to condense a nascent soul, I should prepare these nascent soul pills and nascent soul birth pills. Now in these 3 continents, Dao sects have declined, and it's hard to say if there are any nascent soul cultivators. Where would there be people who can refine nascent soul pills and nascent soul birth pills for them? I'm afraid I have to refine them myself. It's said that only pills refined by pill masters who surpass nascent soul can truly form a nascent soul. However, in terms of cultivation and comprehension of heavenly Tao, my green-robed primordial spirit may not be inferior to a nascent soul cultivator. I wonder if the nascent soul birth pills and nascent soul birth pills he refined are useful? No matter what, I don't have the pill formulas here, and I have to find the pill formulas of these pills in these 3 continents. Alas, it's really difficult. Young Master Fu. Xiaohua's ears perked up, waiting for Yu Linfeng to finish refining the pill formulas. At the same time, he said to Fu Jiwen, "Quickly tell me about the legend." Fu Jiwen cleared his throat and said with a smile, "This legend is different from Misty like immortal robe. According to legend, tens of thousands of years ago, there was a flourishing empire on this hidden immortal continent called Dongchen. This Dongchen Empire's territory was vast, and it occupied most of Qing Province and Su Province among the 9 provinces of hidden immortal continent. It was more than 10 times bigger than the second-ranked country. Moreover, this Dongchen Empire's several generations of kings were extremely wise. Under their political and military skills, this Dongchen Empire's people were rich, and the country was prosperous, attracting tens of thousands of countries. However, in the end, an extremely ambitious monarch appeared in the Dongchen Empire. He wanted to be the ruler of the entire hidden immortal continent, so he began to develop his military force and frantically expanded. At the beginning, the Dongchen Empire's expansion was very smooth, and it once reached 3 provinces. However, when the Dongchen Empire attacked a nameless small country in Yan Province, they encountered an unprecedented resistance. Many of the Dongchen Empire's famous generals died in this small country. In the end, the king was enraged and personally led the army to attack. This king was said to have a cultivation of 5th-grade essence force, and he had countless generals under his command. All of them were 3rd or 4th-grade essence force cultivators. Under the king's frantic attack, that small country was forced to retreat, and finally reached the end of the line. Just when the Dongchen Empire's king thought that victory was in his hands, he heard a series of earth-shattering roars from thousands of miles away. The originally clear sky was instantly covered with dark clouds, and the entire ground was also covered with black flames. In this drastic change in the sky, a huge chessboard appeared. On the left and right of the chessboard, there were 6 godly generals and 6 demon generals. Each of them had their own responsibilities, and they charged out from the chessboard. Within thousands of miles, all living things were slaughtered by these 12 godly demons. Although the king urgently mobilized all the generals to fight back, how could they be a match for the godly demons? In just half a day's time, Dongchen Empire's 100,000 elite soldiers were all crushed into meat paste. Not a single one of them could escape alive. The most frightening thing was that the nameless small country also had no survivors. Within thousands of miles, all living things were plunged into misery and suffering. Vengeful spirits wandered around freely, and even the demon generals who were born with ghosts could not devour the millions of living things in time. Chapter 3278. After all the living beings were massacred, wind and thunder raged between heaven and earth. Torrential rain poured down, and everything within 10,000 miles became a swamp. However, within this swamp, corpses lay everywhere, and blood flowed everywhere. The stench of blood did not dissipate even after 100 years, and no one could survive in this place. Fu Jiwen spoke eloquently. As for the celestial fiend chest that caused such a calamity, it disappeared without a trace. Where it went, or which expert triggered the celestial fiend chest, no one knows until now. Of course, from this legend, I feel that this celestial fiend chest is a great killing machine. Its activation requires the sacrifice of tens of thousands, or even hundreds of millions of living beings. Unless it's a matter of life and death, no one would easily take it out. That's why it's so mysterious. My goodness, Xiaohua sighed. Such a great killing machine. I'm afraid it's ranked first among the 10 great imperial artifacts, right? Why is it only ranked 5th? Fu Jiwen shook his head. This celestial fiend chest is too bloody. Confucian cultivators would never place it first. Actually, Xiaohua laughed again. This legend is too exaggerated, to the point that I feel that it's all made up. Look at that so-called Dongchen Empire. They're crazy and exaggerated. Do those Confucian aristocratic families not care? Although Duanmu aristocratic family is a first-class Confucian aristocratic family, it's not difficult for them to reach out and take care of this matter, right? Secondly, that monarch was actually able to cultivate to the 4th grade of origin power. How long is his lifespan? He's probably tired of being the monarch, right? Thirdly, so many famous generals have fallen in this nameless small country, that monarch. How could he personally go into battle? Furthermore, life is the most important thing. Fourthly, since Dongchen Empire is so powerful, it must have 10 great imperial artifacts, right? Can't the ones ranked first suppress the celestial fiend chess? Haha, Fujiwen laughed. Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't nitpick too much. This is just a legend, who knows if it's true. However, there's one thing that's true. Oh. It's that 10,000 miles of blood pool, Fujiwen said. Today that blood pool is still uninhabitable, and it's still abnormally bloody. Even birds can't fly over that blood pool. Back then, I even made a trip there. Is that so? Xiaohua asked curiously. That place is in Yen province. Yes, it's Celestial Fiend blood pool. Amen, if there is a chance, this Xiao will personally go and take a look. It was very strange. When Xiaohua heard this very unfamiliar name, a trace of feeling suddenly appeared in his heart. This feeling was indescribable, as if it was a kind of summoning? Oh, that's right. As soon as Xiaohua felt this, he immediately asked, the God and Devil blood pool is the place where the God and Devil chest disappeared. Could it be that no one went there to see it? Xiao Xiao, Xiao Xiao, Confucian, Xiao Xiao, Xiaohua, Confucian, Yen Xiao, Yen, Confucian. Confucian, Taoist and Incult of Cultivators, Fiends, Yen, 1,000 years, and Confucian, Xiao, Confucand, and in years. Xiao 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 Yate. Xiao Xiao 8 Yen. Xiao. How dare you? You're going against your ancestors. Just as Xiaohua sighed and wanted to listen to the stories of the other 10 great imperial equipment s, he heard a few angry curses that sounded like rolling thunder coming from downstairs, instantly attracting Xiaohua and Fujiwen's attention. The two of them thought to themselves at the same time. What's going on? At this auction, Yu Linfeng had a row of 4 scrolls open in front of him. These scrolls were all rolled up together, and tied together with purple threads. In front of him, the so-called rotten scholars that Xiaohua had just seen walked out of the crowd. They stood under these scrolls and scolded. Yu Linfeng, you are also a disciple of us Confucian cultivators. Your star-plucking tower is also a branch of us Confucian cultivators. How can you be so blinded by primeval stones? The so-called imperial artifacts, the so-called spiritual herbs, the so-called blood ink, you can just bid. Those are only used for cultivation, defense, and attack. But although the calligraphy and paintings of the great scholars of the early years contain an unparalleled noble spirit, they themselves represent the academic achievements of these great scholars. They are the crystallization of their lifetime's knowledge, and can't be compared to those earthly imperial artifacts and scrolls. You're bidding for the painstaking efforts of these great scholars in public. Isn't that a disgrace to culture? Isn't that a disgrace to your ancestors? Although Yu Linfeng's expression was somewhat awkward, he still carefully cupped his hands and said, Seniors, although these scrolls are the writings of great scholars, they're still scrolls. Our star-picking tower can't just keep these sacred objects in our tower, can we? We have to let these great scholars' knowledge be admired by the younger generation, right? Perhaps our star-picking tower's method is a bit wrong, a bit vulgar and can't enter your eyes, but it's still our star-picking tower's way of commemorating and valuing these great scholars, right? Bullshit. An old man with a bald head and a few strands of white hair under his chin raised his walking stick and swung it at Yu Linfeng in midair. He scolded. I'll beat you to death, you unfilial junior. The calligraphy and paintings of great scholars are elegant objects that can only be admired in a quiet room. Once these elegant objects are here, they're stained with the stench of money. Inside, the noble spirit that all of you are drooling over is also somewhat inferior. Although these calligraphy and paintings have an incomparably pure noble spirit, these are the condensation of the great scholar's essence, qi, and spirit. They're not used for ordinary attacks. Another old man raised his trembling arm and said, You little bastard, your words are even better than singing. Who doesn't know that you're using these calligraphy and paintings as scrolls? Using the essence, qi, and spirit of these great scholars to fight for you? When the essence, qi, and spirit of these calligraphy and paintings are gone, these calligraphy and paintings will become trash. AI, what a wastrel. Ha ha ha. Upstairs, Xiaohua laughed, thinking, isn't this the rotten scholar that Xiaoyi mentioned just now, who's here to cause trouble? They treat the scrolls of those great scholars as their heirlooms and don't allow Zhaixing Lu to bid for them. But is this possible? Sure enough, Yu Linfeng said loudly, seniors, if you feel that these calligraphy and paintings are the painstaking efforts of great scholars, and can only be admired in a quiet room, then why don't you bid for these calligraphy and paintings? If they're in your hands, won't my Zhaixing Lu be more at ease? Your Zhaixing Lu is blinded by greed. Don't tell me the base price of these calligraphy and paintings are in supreme-grade primordial stones. How can a few poor old men like us afford to bid for them? A few rotten scholars said angrily. Hearing this, Fujiwen also understood. He sighed and said, what these seniors said is right. The ancient great scholars' handwriting is getting fewer and fewer. I don't know when these will all disappear. Calligraphy and paintings without essence, qi, and spirit are simply dead objects. It's impossible to show the style of the great scholars of various sects. Xiaohua just stood there and spoke without pain. He waved his hand with a smile. If the old doesn't go, the new won't come. Without these ancient great scholars, aren't there still the great scholars of today? There are more and more great scholars in each generation. What's so great about that? Haha, Fujiwen smiled bitterly and said, fellow Xiao may not know, but the so-called great scholars are also called great scholars. They're not purely from cultivation. They're those who read books and poems, have noble moral character, and are knowledgeable scholars. Those who can be called great scholars, or great scholars, are those who opened a school of thought and have a place in the debate of the 100 schools of thought. How can it be so easy for the later generations to give birth to them? So that's how it is. Xiaohua's face unconsciously changed, and he was filled with respect. He already understood that this so-called great scholar was not a kind of realm as he thought, but a kind of honor, a kind of title. If he forced himself to compare with the people of the Tao sect, then the founder of the Imperial Thunder sect, Taoist Master Qianyin, was probably this kind of person. Then, the debate of the 100 schools of thought. Xiaohua just said half of this sentence, but he swallowed it back down. He didn't even seem to understand the 10 great imperial artifacts. Now he actually wanted to ask about the debate of the 100 schools of thought. He was afraid that if he let Fujiwen ask them one by one, he wouldn't be able to finish all of them tonight. Let's wait and slowly ask in the future. Xiaohua didn't ask anymore, but at the auction, those rotten scholars became even more aggressive. They practically jumped up and cursed Zhaixing Lu's evil deeds. From the calligraphy and paintings of the great scholars to the cultivation methods of the Confucian school, and even the imperial artifacts of the Confucian school, they all became Zhaixing Lu's crimes of forgetting their ancestors and betraying their ancestors. No matter how Yu Linfeng explained, he was not allowed to bid on these great scholars' calligraphy and paintings. Xiaohua was a bit bored, and was just about to ask about the 10 great imperial artifacts when he suddenly became vigilant. He raised his eyebrows and asked, Xiao Yi, what's the matter? Reporting to Senior, someone sent a visiting card, and wants to come and pay a visit to Senior. Xiao Yi's voice came from outside. Xiaohua's eyes turned and he said with a smile, come in first. Yes, Senior. As Xiao Yi spoke, she walked in with a golden visiting card. Just as she was about to respectfully hand it over, Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and said, don't be anxious. This old man is just asking, is the owner of this visiting card an honored guest on the 3rd floor? Yes, Senior. Xiao Yi nodded and said, any honored guest on the 3rd floor of the Bright Moon Palace can pay a visit to each other if they don't want to hide their identity. Just now, this servant not only saw several attendants of the honored guest carrying visiting cards to other pavilions, but also saw 2 honored guests enter other rooms. Who sent this visiting card? Do you know? Xiaohua asked again. Xiao Yi shook her head. This servant doesn't know. The one who sent the visiting card was also Xiao Yi, not that Senior's attendant. And, since that's the case, this old man doesn't need to look at this visiting card. Xiaohua said with a flick of his sleeve. Tell that Xiao Yi exactly what I said. Xiao Yi's expression changed slightly again, and she begged in a low voice, "Senior, you don't need to make things so stiff. Even if you don't want to see that person, you only need to say that you don't want to see him. There's no need to return the visiting card. This kind of face-slapping matter. Senior should consider it more carefully." Chapter 3279. So it's like this. Xiaohua had always believed in the advice of others. He thought for a moment and said, "Then put down the visiting card. You tell Xiao Yi that this old man has a guest here, and it's not convenient for me to see him." Xiao Yi's face lit up with joy. She smiled sweetly at Xiaohua and placed the visiting card on the desk before hurrying out. Fu Jiwen really wanted to know who the guest was. However, this was clearly Xiaohua's private matter. Since Xiaohua didn't intend to open the golden visiting card, Fu Jiwen shifted his gaze away from the golden visiting card and looked at the auction. At this time, the auction was as lively as a marketplace. Although there were no peddlers, the several old men, whose veins were bulging, looked like old beggars who were pointing and gesticulating around a vegetable stall. Where was the elegance in them? Where was the etiquette? It was as if the beauty of their first love was suddenly exposed in front of everyone, and they were trying their best to hide it. However, as Xiaohua watched, he felt somewhat sorrowful in his heart. Yes, the people of the secular world often said that there were only two words in this world, either fame or fortune. Everything else was born for fame and fortune. And if these two words were combined into one, they would become one word, and that would be profit. All the people in the world came for profit, and all the people in the world went for profit. This was exactly the case. Similarly, in the eyes of cultivators, there were also two words, either merit or longevity. All other things were born for this merit and longevity. This skill was naturally the cultivation level, the realm, and the strength. This longevity was also lifespan, and immortality that cultivators pursued. If these two words were combined into one, it would be longevity. The cultivators in the world had countless methods. Killing and robbing, deceiving each other, and being selfish. Wasn't it all for strength? And with strength, wasn't collecting a lot of resources for one's own longevity? It could also be said that everything in the world came for longevity, and everything in the world went for longevity. On the other hand, these seemingly inflexible scholars, although they took advantage of their seniority and pointed fingers at others, what they stubbornly defended was also the thought in their hearts. This thought was the inheritance of Confucian cultivation, the essence of Confucian cultivation, the true meaning of Confucian cultivation. Perhaps Daoshan, who doesn't have any cultivation, can be compared to them. Looking at these rotten scholars, Xiaohua couldn't help but think of Daoshan. When they had just arrived at the Seven Suns Temple tonight, Daoshan's meticulous etiquette and clean and decent Taoist robes had left a deep impression on Xiaohua. This might be the last pride of these so-called rotten scholars, and also their last struggle. Xiaohua looked at the few old men who were panting and shouting hoarsely as he thought to himself. In the torrent of people who pursue profits, the so-called persistence can only be regarded as pedantic, and can only be used as a support. In the eyes of others, the dignity that they try their best to maintain can only be regarded as the performance of actors, which can only make people laugh. Perhaps, such a Confucian cultivator is the hope of Taoism? Thinking of Xiao Yi's mockery of these rotten scholars, Xiaohua understood that the previous inheritance of Confucian cultivation had already declined, and the Taoist cultivation method that they had always ridiculed had gradually appeared. Even if it was only the beginning, it was clear that the essence of Taoism cultivation had already been implanted in the hearts of the new generation of Confucian cultivators. After another half a meal of cultivation, several white-haired rotten scholars collapsed on the ground. After all, they were already old, and their bodies could no longer support their rainbow-like ideals. Several Xiao Yis from the Bright Moon Palace leisurely walked over and offered hot tea and pastries. But how could these old men use the pastries of the Bright Moon Palace? What was the difference between this and food that was given away? The old man's face was pale, and with a wave of his sleeve, all the pastries and hot water fell to the ground. He stepped on the pastries and slowly staggered away. Looking at these lonely figures, the entire Bright Moon Palace was deathly silent. Other people might not have thought as much as Xiaohua, But these old men's actions that pointed directly at their hearts caused them to naturally feel ashamed in their hearts, an indescribable sense of inferiority. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, Fu Jiwen, who was beside him, looked at these old men with an indescribable expression in his eyes. He sighed deeply, and his tone was obviously heavy. "Young Master Fu?" Xiao Hua asked curiously. "Could it be you have other thoughts about these rotten scholars?" "Hehe, fellow Taoist Xiao also knows about rotten scholars?" Fu Jiwen smiled faintly. "This humble one not only has some thoughts, but this humble one has also been deeply harmed by them." "Deeply harmed by them?" Xiao Hua was even more puzzled. "Can you tell me more about it?" "I'm really sorry, fellow Taoist Xiao, but this humble one's privacy, and it's not good to joke about it." Fu Jiwen shook his head. "However, although this humble one says that this humble one has been deeply harmed by them, the root of this harm is still love. It's just that this love is too heavy, too old-fashioned." Xiao Hua looked thoughtfully at Fu Jiwen's complicated expression, then smiled and said, "As long as it's love, then it's fine. Whether it's old-fashioned or heavy, it's better than nothing. Moreover, this is love, the most selfless thing in the world." "Young Master Fu, treasure it well." "Yes, this humble one understands." Fu Jiwen nodded. "Deep love, deep responsibility, that's exactly how it is." At this point, Fu Jiwen didn't say anything else, and Xiao Hua didn't ask any more questions. He stuck his head out and looked down. At this moment, he was very curious about these 4 scrolls. These were the handwriting of a great scholar who founded a sect. What would they look like? Fellow immortals, at this moment, Yu Linfeng smiled bitterly. My Zhai Xing Lu actually understands these elders' painstaking efforts. These scrolls are indeed the handwriting of an ancient great scholar, and shouldn't be treated as ordinary scrolls to be auctioned. Of course, my Zhai Xing Lu has also taken out these scrolls separately as a sign of respect. Moreover, my Zhai Xing Lu has always been a place for auctions. Since my Zhai Xing Lu has obtained these scrolls, it means that these scrolls can be auctioned. Moreover, our Confucian cultivation is the grandest cultivation method in the world, and we can't stick to the rules. We can only innovate at every moment and maintain a fresh flow of water. This is the only way to ensure our Confucian cultivation's solid position in the 3 continents. Forget it, this humble one won't say much. Either way, others will be criticized, and this humble one will silently guard my heart. This humble one is currently the host of this auction, so this auction will be a success." Yu Linfeng pointed at the scrolls in front of him again and smiled bitterly. "Also, this humble one would like to say that the handwriting in these scrolls, although it's also left behind by a great Confucian cultivator, it's not the great Confucian you all mentioned just now. For example, the scroll on the left has the word, law, written by the great Confucian of the legalists, Senior Han Cheng. Fellow immortals, think about it, if it's really the handwriting of a great Confucian who founded a sect, then it's a treasure of calligraphy in the world. Not to mention that my Zhai Xing Lu can't afford it. Even if we want to bid, we have to save it for last." "Haha, fellow immortal, you don't hold back your resentment." A cultivator laughed. "The old man's words make sense, and your Zhai Xing Lu's actions are also reasonable. There's no right or wrong in this world. Fellow immortal, why don't you open Senior Han's treasure of calligraphy and take a look?" "That's right, fellow immortal, you. Hurry up and open Senior Han's treasure of calligraphy. We can't wait any longer." Many people started shouting, and even more people looked eagerly at the other 3 scrolls. They really wanted to know who the great Confucian handwriting that Zhai Xing Lu had put up for bid belonged to. "Everyone, please wait a moment. I still have to inform the officials of the Copper Pillar State. If the great Confucian handwriting is opened, it'll cause too much of a commotion," Yu Linfeng said, gesturing to a corner of the Bright Moon Palace. There, a woman in palace robes hurried over. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, upstairs," Fu Jiwen explained to Xiao Hua. "The legalists are a branch of Confucian cultivators. Because they believe in using law to rule the country. There's no need to be close or distant. There's no need to be high or low. There's no need to judge by law. They're called the legalists." The famous ancient figures Guanzhong and Zichan were the pioneers of the legalists. Li Kai, Xiangyang, Shenbuhai, Shendao, and the others founded the legalists. In the end, Han Fei combined Xiangyang's law, Shendao's power, and Shenbuhai's technique to form the culmination of the legalists' ideology. Therefore, Han Fei can be considered the great scholar who founded the legalists. He received the honorific title of Zi, and is known as Han Fei Zi. Note: in the future esoteric debate, the third place won't be listed solely for the ancestors. It's in accordance with history. However, everyone must remember that this is just a name. There's no need to take the rest seriously. Apart from Senior Han Fei Zi, the other representatives of the legalists are Li Si and Xiangyang. As for Senior Han Cheng, he's a descendant of Senior Han Fei Zi. As for which generation, I'm not too sure. Apart from the legalists, what other 99 schools are there? Xiaohua finally couldn't help but ask. Fu Jiwen smiled and waved his hand. Fellow Taoist, you misunderstand. The esoteric debate is just a description of the numerous and complex schools of thought. There aren't really 100 schools of thought. To be honest, according to the historical records, there were many schools of thought that hadn't been founded. How could there be only 100? There were more than thousands. Confucianism is actually this prosperous? Xiaohua was truly amazed. Apart from the legalists, the most famous schools are the Confucians, the Mahists, the militarists, the scholars, the Yin-Yang school, the school of vertical and horizontal, the school of miscellaneous, the school of farmer, the school of fiction, the school of martial arts, and other schools of thought. Fu Jiwen said simply. Even if it's just these simple and famous schools, I'm afraid fellow Taoist Xiao will be confused if I explain them one by one. Why don't you take a look at what scrolls the Bright Moon Palace is selling, and I'll slowly explain them to fellow Taoist. Hee, that's great, Xiaohua nodded. To be honest, when he heard the legalists say something like don't be too close or distant, don't be too noble or lowly, cut off by law, Xiaohua felt a headache coming on. He was a genuine Taoist cultivator. Although he had some Confucian foundation, he didn't have the slightest understanding of any theories or poetry. How could he possibly understand? He might as well listen to the stories of the 10 great imperial artifacts. Chapter 3280. Yu Linfeng smiled and raised his hand. Han Cheng's scroll slowly flew to Yu Linfeng's eyes. Yu Linfeng carefully reached out and pinched the purple thread. With a gentle tug, the scroll slowly unfurled. Swoosh! A pure white light shot out from where the scroll was unfurled, as if opening a door under the sun. Buzz! Another sword hum followed the white light. Boom! The light was so dazzling that even someone as strong as Xiaohua couldn't help but squint. Before he could get used to the light, another muffled thunderous sound rushed out from the scroll like a torrential river, going against the heavens and rushing towards the top of the Bright Moon Palace. Silala! With a sound that sounded like it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The defensive primary formation on top of the Bright Moon Palace was instantly destroyed by the overwhelming gang qi contained within the white light. Not only did the countless sword cries within the Bright Moon Palace resonate, but the overwhelming gang qi also pierced straight into the night sky like a giant sword. Bright Moon Square was a place that didn't sleep. It was brightly lit and people didn't sleep at all. Zhaixinglu was an extremely mysterious place to them, because those who could come to Bright Moon Square were all rich, but rich people might not be able to go to Zhaixinglu. Even if some people who didn't know the details wanted to take a look at Zhaixinglu, they didn't have any vitality stones or traces of cultivation. It was difficult for them to enter Zhaixinglu. Now this giant flying sword was like a heavenly soldier rushing into the night sky. Everyone within 10 miles could see it clearly. How could they not be shocked? Inevitably, everyone in the Bright Moon Lane escaped from the nephrite and the fine wine. They stretched their bodies to look at the flying sword in the night sky, gesticulating with their hands and feet. They were abnormally excited as they discussed incessantly. Such a grand occasion was even more beautiful than any fireworks. Although all eyes in Bright Moon Square were focused on Zhaixinglu, although those who hadn't slept yet were also focused on Zhaixinglu, the vast energy that represented righteousness and righteousness couldn't illuminate the night sky. Between the light and darkness, there were still some ghosts that wandered freely in the darkness, undisturbed by the sharpness of the flying sword. This is the sword chi of a sword cultivator. The moment Han Qing opened the scroll, the brilliance was so brilliant that Xiaohua couldn't help but close his eyes. However, even so, the large law character still passed through Xiaohua's eyes and engraved itself into his mind. Every stroke of this law character was in the shape of a flying sword. The entire brilliance rushing into the night sky was also a soaring sword energy. Xiaohua, who was used to seeing sword qi in Dawn Rain continent, couldn't help but groan. He completely understood in his heart. This sword cultivator is indeed a branch of Confucian cultivator. Moreover, it actually originated from Confucian cultivator's legalism. Alas, there are laws in the mortal world, with punishment as the guiding principle. There are laws in heaven and earth, with the sword as the guiding principle. Isn't the law of heaven and earth swept away by sword energy? Inside the Bright Moon Palace, the sounds of metal clanging could be heard. Some were the cries of swords, and some were the cries of weapons. Even some of the weaker cultivators had their true energy stirred. Whoosh! Yu Linfeng shook the scroll in his hand, and the scroll slowly closed up. The sword light that soared into the sky was absorbed into the scroll. Naturally, the sounds of metal clanging within the Bright Moon Palace gradually faded away, and the palace gradually returned to its previous calm. Good heavens, this is merely Senior Han Cheng's handwriting, but it already has such a powerful aura. The majestic aura contained in this handwriting can really shock heaven and earth. Even after fellow immortal Yu put away the scroll, this one still hasn't seen Senior Han's original handwriting. If someone were to hold this scroll, wouldn't it be comparable to an imperial weapon? A shocked voice couldn't help but speak. I just don't know, if it was Senior Han Fizi's original handwriting, what kind of aura would it have? Fellow immortal, what you said is also this one's thoughts. Yu Linfeng's eyes flashed with fervor as he looked at the scroll in front of him. Although this one hasn't seen that kind of heaven-shaking aura, this one heard from the seniors of Star Plucking Tower that if it was Senior Han Fizi's handwriting, this brilliance should be able to penetrate the outer realms and reflect the power of the outer realm stars. No evil in the world can resist this power of starlight. In particular, if it was Senior Han Fizi's handwriting, what broke through just now wasn't my Bright Moon Palace's origin array, but all the restrictions within a radius of 100 li would no longer exist. Damn it, others didn't say anything, but Xiaohua jumped up first and scolded with a smile. How is that possible? This thing isn't a real spiritual treasure. Without anyone activating it, how can it have such power? Unfortunately, before Xiaohua finished speaking, Fujiwen laughed and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, you're still lacking. What Yu Linfeng said. I'm afraid it's not enough to describe Senior Han Fizi's original handwriting at his peak. According to this one's ancestors, 100,000 years ago, when the demon realm invaded. What? Demon realm invaded? Xiaohua's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. This was the first time he heard about the demon realm in the hidden immortal continent. Yes, it's really that time when the demon realm invaded. Fujiwen didn't understand Xiaohua's surprise and nodded. That time, Senior Han Fizi's original handwriting revealed its might for the first time. When it was opened, it directly killed 100 demon generals. 100 demon generals. Xiaohua was flabbergasted. He already knew from Zhang Qingxiao that the strength of a demon general was comparable to the golden core and nascent soul stage of the Dao sect. This Senior Han Fizi's handwriting was actually able to kill 100 nascent soul stage demon generals. Wasn't this too unimaginable? Bragging. Although Xiaohua didn't refute, it was obvious that he was already secretly criticizing. It's exactly 100 demon generals. Fujiwen laughed. Fellow Taoist, don't think this one is exaggerating. The righteous qi of us Confucian cultivators is the nemesis of the demon realm. Although their physical bodies are incomparably powerful, the demon flames and demon blood they cultivate have no resistance in front of the righteous qi of us Confucian cultivators. Especially when they invaded my hidden immortal continent. In front of the righteous qi that has been settled for hundreds of millions of years, it was like a drop of water falling into a sea of fire. How could it set off a big wave? Oh, this one understands. Xiaohua nodded. There is righteous qi in heaven and earth. Since ancient times, it has been supporting the justice of the world. As long as there are people, There will be this kind of aura, everlasting. No, what fellow Taoist said is wrong. Fu Jiwen shook his head. There is righteous qi in heaven and earth. This righteous qi has existed since ancient times, and does not vary from person to person. Where there are people, there is righteous qi. Where there are no people, there is also righteous qi. It can be said that everything has righteous qi. Even the demon realm also has righteous qi. And this righteous qi is the true qi cultivated by Confucian cultivators. It is not the spiritual qi of heaven and earth cultivated by the Tao sect. Boom! Fu Jiwen's words were like a stone rushing into Xiaohua's ancient well that had remained motionless for 10,000 years. Xiaohua instantly became like a clay statue. An indescribable fluctuation emitted from Xiaohua's body. The stardust that was originally covering his image instantly turned into dust and floated around Xiaohua. Of course, in just an instant, the starlight and silver light in Xiaohua's eyes retracted. All the dust fell around Xiaohua and turned back into stardust. A sudden realization came from Xiaohua's mouth. So it's like this. So it's like this. This one was wrong. Yes, Xiaohua was really wrong. His mistake was inconceivable. He had always been cultivating the righteous qi of Confucian cultivators, but what he refined was only the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. How could it be the righteous qi? No wonder he had been cultivating for 100 years, and was still unable to condense his core. It turned out that the path he started on was wrong, and his success in refining essence into qi, most of it was because of the core that he passed on to others, right? Fellow Taoist Xiao? Fu Jiwen was somewhat puzzled. He hesitantly asked Xiaohua, "What's wrong?" Nothing. Since he found the root, Xiaohua immediately felt refreshed. He said with a smile, "This one always thought that the righteous qi was the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Who knew that it was actually so different?" "Oh, that's natural." Fu Jiwen understood and said with a smile, "This is the difference between the Tao sect and Confucian cultivators. Of course there are differences. However, sometimes the righteous qi has the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, and the righteous qi within the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. However, it may not be possible to distinguish them clearly." "Then, how can one distinguish the righteous qi?" Xiaohua asked tentatively. "Is it possible that there is a secret technique within the basic cultivation method of Confucian cultivators that is the same as the Tao sects?" "It's not the same." Fu Jiwen waved his hand and said, "The reason why Confucian cultivators are called Confucian cultivators is because they use the righteous qi as their foundation. They rely on Confucian to distinguish the righteous qi. Although everyone more or less has the righteous qi in their body, how can a common person like a common person understand the righteous qi? Only people like us who read and recite scriptures can read the righteous qi from the ancient characters. Only then can we use this righteous qi to trigger our own righteous qi. With our own righteous qi, only then can we draw in the righteous qi of heaven and earth." And I've learned." Xiaohua nodded. He understood that the cultivation of Confucian cultivators was still the same. It seemed that the so-called secret technique was just an opportunistic trick of the Tao sect. Suddenly, Xiaohua's heart jumped. He seemed to have a bad premonition. He seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly asked, "Fu Jiwen, just now did you see something?" "Fellow Taoist Xiao, what are you talking about?" Fu Jiwen was surprised by Xiaohua's question. He didn't know what was going on. Xiaohua saw Fu Jiwen's ignorance and unconsciously felt relieved. In the moment when he was absent-minded, Shueshue saw his death. Master Kuqin also saw his death. Xiaohua didn't want this Confucian cultivator in front of him to follow in their footsteps. "It's nothing." Xiaohua waved his hand and said with a smile. However, just as he waved his hand a few times, he was stunned again. "That's not right. If Confucian cultivators don't need the spiritual qi of heaven and earth to cultivate, then what spirit stones do they use? If they don't use spirit stones, why do they still use spirit stones on the hidden immortal continent?" Xiaohua seemed to have suddenly woken up. He seemed to have suddenly become confused. He frowned in thought. Chapter 3281. Forget it, let's just ask. Xiaohua bitterly smiled. Since I've already asked so many questions, I don't mind asking a few more idiotic questions. After Xiao Hua finished speaking the doubts in his heart, it was Fujiwen's turn to be surprised. If it was some common knowledge from before, it could be said that Xiao Hua was a cultivator from overseas, and had not stepped on the continent for a long time, so he did not know much. However, this matter of origin stones was too inconceivable. Cough cough, Xiao Hua smiled. Young Master Fu, I've always been a lone cultivator and I've always been self-sufficient, so I really don't know about this nothing. Fu Jiwen hurriedly waved his hand. What you know is what you know, what you don't know is what you don't know. Fellow Taoist Xiao is indeed magnanimous, but I'm still lacking. Then, Fu Jiwen gave a simple explanation. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, this primordial stone also contained righteous qi. However, from what Fu Jiwen could see, the primordial stone was slightly inferior to the primordial qi used for Taoist cultivation. Of course, Confucian cultivators also had methods to absorb the noble spirit from the source stone. However, ordinary Confucian cultivators didn't use these methods. Confucian cultivators believed that the noble spirit was a living and lively world origin qi. Only the noble spirit that flowed between heaven and earth, and was drawn from densely populated places was the best. Therefore, source stones were used to refine imperial equipment and arrange origin formations. So that's how it is. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. Connecting it to what he saw with his illusion breaker eyes, there were many types of world origin qi in this world. If Taoists picked one type, Confucian cultivators could naturally choose another type, and the world origin qi could also be condensed into a spirit stone. However, absorbing the noble spirit from heaven and earth is somewhat difficult. It's easy to absorb the noble spirit from the source stone. Nowadays, students are greedy and many students have secretly started to use source stones to cultivate. Fu Jiwen sighed and said, especially my Taoist sect's spirit pills. It is said that after refining with a special method, it can also promote the cultivation of Confucian cultivators. Students who haven't broken through for a long time have also started to try. Now the spirit grass and spirit fruits are a lot more expensive than before. Humans are insatiable and always seek opportunities for themselves. In the long run, what difference will there be between Confucianism and Taoism? In any case, this Xiao is a Taoist, so I won't worry about Confucian cultivators. Xiao Hua shrugged. Everyone sweeps the snow in front of their own door. There's no need to worry about others. Looking back at the auction, legalist senior Han Cheng's handwriting had already set off a frenzy of bidding. Even young Master Duanmu, who was opposite Xiao Hua, was repeatedly bidding. Clearly, this handwriting was his main objective for coming to Zhai Xinglu this time. After more than 10 rounds of bidding, everyone finally stopped. No one else bid against young Master Duanmu. However, at this moment, everyone's gaze was focused on Xiao Hua. He thought that Xiao Hua hadn't opened his mouth to bid from beginning to end. Ha ha, Xiao Hua laughed. He finally understood why young Master Duanmu sent the visiting card. That was to test him, to show him a kind of intention. That was, to not let Xiao Hua compete with him in order to reach the bottom line in his heart. Add 10 high-grade primordial stones. Xiao Hua said indifferently. Boom, everyone immediately cheered loudly. This one will also add 10 high-grade primordial stones. Young Master Duanmu's tone was also indifferent. It didn't matter if Xiao Hua increased the price. The key was that he couldn't force him step by step. In the end, it was just as young Master Duanmu thought. Xiao Hua only increased the price once, conveying that he already knew the meaning, and didn't say anything else. This caused the cultivators who wanted to watch the show to feel sad. All right, Yu Linfeng had a smile on his face. With a wave of his hand, great scholar Han Cheng's handwriting flew into young Master Duanmu's pavilion. With another wave of his hand, the second scroll slowly landed in front of him. This is the second great scholar's handwriting today. Fellow immortals may not be familiar with this great scholar, but fellow immortals definitely know about Confucianism. This great scholar is the Yinyang School's old master Zhou Yuanhan. Along with Yu Linfeng's long voice, he stretched out his slender finger and pulled the purple silk thread. As the scroll fell, 2 bright and dark rays of light suddenly appeared. Although it was somewhat inferior to Han Cheng's sword qi, The light and dark rays had a solemn air of annihilation. At the same time, these two rays of light soared into the sky, higher than the previous soared Qi, and formed the shape of a huge yin-yang fish in the night sky. As the brilliance of this yin-yang fish circulated in the night sky, thousands of evil spirits scattered in the night sky, causing the entire bright moon square to seem to tremble. Clear yang is the sky, turbid yin is the earth. Above the earth is the clouds, below the sky is the rain. Rain comes from the earth, clouds come from the sky. Yin and yang are the Tao of heaven and earth, the outline of all things, the parents of change, the origin of life and death, and the abode of the gods. Fu Jiwen looked at the yin-yang fish in the sky through the broken origin array of the bright moon palace and sighed. Heaven and earth have yin and yin and yang turn into two qis. Everything can be divided into two sides, yin and yang. This school of yin-yang advocates controlling the yin and yang of heaven and earth, using the two qis of yin and yang to kill all things. The great scholar who established the school of yin-yang was Zhou Yan. Later on, because he was called Zi, he was given the name Zhou Yanzi. This old master Zhou Yuanhan is most likely his descendant. The esoteric debate is indeed formidable. Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, even though our Taoism also has the saying that Tao begets one, and one is divided into yin and yang, but the profoundness of yin and yang is truly obscure. Without a certain level of cultivation, how can one understand it? This Xiao really did not expect that this Confucian cultivator actually has a school of yin-yang that specializes in studying yin and yang. Furthermore, this Xiao admires this senior Zhou Yanzi even more. How can he explain yin and yang so clearly? That's right, 100 years ago, when Shui and Wu Hai's soul entered Xiaohua's space, he had already experienced the division of yin and yang. If one were to talk about comprehension, Xiaohua himself indeed has a lot. However, if one were to ask him to form a theory and explain it, it would be extremely difficult. Just like what the Taoists often say, Tao can be said, but it is not an ordinary Tao. Name can be named, but it is not an ordinary name. Just a few words can indeed extend a lot of comprehension, or can only be understood but not explained. Actually, a strange expression appeared on Fu Jiwen's face. He hesitated for a bit, then smiled and said, this yin-yang school might have been extremely powerful in the past. It is said that Senior Zhou Yanzi obtained an innate spiritual object called the Yin-Yang Illustrated Handbook. From it, he comprehended the Tao of yin and yang, and established his own school. However, as the yin-yang school of yin-yang developed, the yin-yang Illustrated Handbook was lost for some unknown reason. The yin-yang school of yin-yang's research on yin and yang gradually deviated. Didn't fellow Taoist Yulin Fengjiu say it clearly just now? Everyone might not know about Zhou Yanzi, but almost everyone in the yin-yang school knows about him. That's because the current yin and yang, more or less falls into the intersection of yin and yang. Some crooked sects, such as the yin-yang unity school, also passed down some of their secret techniques from the yin-yang school of yin-yang. At this point, Fu Jiwen did not say anything else. Xiaohua was also a person who had undergone dual cultivation. How could he not understand? Perhaps some dual cultivation secret technique, some fusion technique. These yin and yang mating techniques were the things that the yin-yang school of yin-yang was talking about, right? Decline. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. This might be the current situation that those so-called rotten scholars don't want to see. Fu Jiwen smiled and said, time flies, clouds and flowers pass by like water. On this hidden immortal continent, not only are the dynasties of 10,000 countries replaced, even the 100 schools are also being washed away by great waves. Only schools and doctrines that can adapt to the changes of the times can truly be preserved. These are not things that can be done by humans. Back then, the Tao sect was tyrannical for a period of time. It could almost contend with the Confucian cultivators, Buddhist sects, and even the demon race. However, what about the current Tao sect? After the ancient war, wasn't it also obliterated? If you want to revive the Tao sect, is it something that can be done by a few generations? Let's not talk about this. When Fu Jiwen talked about the decline of the Tao sect, he seemed to be afraid that Xiaohua would be displeased, so he changed the topic. Looking at the fierce bidding scene downstairs, he said, Such a rare yin-yang school of yin-yang writing. Doesn't fellow Taoist Xiao want to bid for one? Even if this thing's true qi is used up, it is still an authentic work handed down from generation to generation. Forget it, Xiao Hua said with a smile. If it was some yin-yang illustrated handbook, if it was some harmony secret manual, this Xiao would still be interested. What kind of writing is this? This Xiao doesn't understand. Puffed, Fujiwen laughed. Fellow Taoist Xiao is really a straightforward person. If it was an ordinary Confucian scholar, they would definitely not say these words. You dare to do it while hiding in your room, but don't dare to say it when you come out? Xiao Hua snorted disdainfully. Hee, if you want to say it, you have to use alternative words. For example, the joy of the boudoir is even greater than the one who draws the eyebrows. Fellow Taoist Zhao's straightforwardness is a disgrace to the refined. Damn it, to turn a good yin-yang into a marriage, isn't this a disgrace to the refined? Xiao Hua really couldn't see through the act of covering one's ears while stealing a bell. Especially using words to replace imagination, it was really annoying. While the two were talking, that Zhou Yuanhan's old man Zhou's calligraphy was also bought by a certain senior on the third floor. Xiao Hua also clearly saw that young Master Duanmu also seemed to slightly raise the price and immediately gave up. Clearly, he also had a tacit understanding with the others. Xiao Hua could know, and Yu Linfeng even more so. However, this was a kind of mutual compromise. The price of the calligraphy was something that both sides could bear. Who would care about the movements behind the scenes? Yu Linfeng sent that scroll to the third floor's balcony and began to bluff the third scroll. Fellow immortals, the writing on this third scroll is also very famous. Moreover, this school created a Confucian cultivation method that is widely spread in my hidden immortal continent. As he said that, Yu Linfeng opened this scroll again. Huop, like a burst of water, 10,000 rays of brilliance poured out from the scroll. Like the Milky Way pouring out, it directly rushed into the night sky. It was incomparably gorgeous. Noble Spirit River. Dozens of young voices shouted in unison. This is the school of vertical and horizontal Confucian cultivators. Haha, Yu Linfeng laughed loudly and said, correct. The river character on this scroll is the authentic work of the school of vertical and horizontal Confucian Lu Wensheng. Chapter 3282. Upstairs, Fujiwen pointed at the righteous spirit that flashed like the Milky Way and said, the school of vertical and horizontal is a very famous school in the esoteric debate. The school of vertical and horizontal is the school of vertical and horizontal, is the school of vertical and horizontal, is the school of vertical and horizontal, is the school of vertical and horizontal. This is the so-called vertical and horizontal. The school of vertical and horizontal was created by the two seniors Zhang Yi and Su Qin. Senior Su Qin advocated the vertical and Senior Zhang Yi advocated the horizontal. It was in the vertical and horizontal that the two seniors comprehended the true essence of water flow and created the cultivation method of the righteous spirit Long River. Using this as a basis, they were honored as Su Qin Zi and Zhang Yi Zi respectively, leaving their names in history. Moreover, this righteous spirit Long River is very easy to obtain. It is the simplest among the many cultivation methods of the Confucian cultivators. Therefore, once this cultivation method was spread out, it was immediately passed down. In the ancient times, the number of disciples of the school of vertical and horizontal were as many as the hairs on an ox. The Confucian cultivators who answered in unison just now were most likely disciples who cultivated the righteous spirit Long River. Of course, now that this cultivation method has been spread out, they may not necessarily be disciples of the school of vertical and horizontal. As Fujiwen spoke, many cultivators began to bid again. This time, the liveliness was even greater than before. This was because great scholar Lu Cheng's handwriting not only had the same righteous spirit Long River as the previous handwriting, but also the true essence of the righteous spirit Long River could be found in this handwriting. This was the so-called killing two birds with one stone. All the Confucian cultivators who cultivated the righteous spirit Long River naturally rushed like ducks. After seeing the righteous spirit Long River of legalism, school of yin-yang, and school of vertical and horizontal, Xiao Hua was looking forward to the handwriting in the last scroll. He simply didn't ask about the 10 great imperial artifacts that Fujiwen hadn't explained yet. He smiled and stuck his head out, looking at the sounds of bidding below with interest. Fujiwen saw that Xiaohua's attention wasn't here and didn't say much. He looked at Xiaohua's star-like figure with some confusion. He really didn't understand why Xiaohua asked him so much common sense. That's right, common sense. As a cultivator of the hidden immortal continent, whether they cultivated Confucian cultivators, Buddhist cultivators, or even Taoist cultivation methods, as long as they grew up here, they should know this common sense. Although Xiaohua was a Tao sect cultivator and didn't understand the cultivation of Confucian cultivators, the 100 Schools debate was an ancient story. The 10 great imperial artifacts were stories that ordinary people grew up listening to. How could Xiaohua not know? Even if he was an overseas rogue cultivator, he still had to grow up, right? Fujiwen did not believe that a cultivator who grew up in the hidden immortal continent would not know about the 10 great imperial equipment. Perhaps fellow Taoist Xiao came from the Thousand Demons sacred realm or the Pure Land world. This was Fujiwen's final guess, but this guess was immediately doubted by himself. Essence stones, who in the 3 continents didn't know about them. Maybe he came from the Pure Land. That place doesn't need vitality stones. When the dust settled, to everyone's surprise, the authentic work of the School of Vertical and Horizontal's great scholar, Lu Wensheng, was not bought by the cultivators on the balcony. The final bidder was an unknown cultivator on the ground floor. Hee, looks like I'm not the only one who's keeping a low profile. Xiaohua laughed. Fujiwen frowned and said, that might not be the case. In my opinion, I'm afraid several small aristocratic families or several sects gathered together to bid. Who cares who he is? It has nothing to do with me. I've never cultivated the Noble Spirit River, and I don't know anything about authentic works. Xiaohua stretched. Moreover, this star-picking towers auction, TSK, it's really boring. There's nothing that I want. Fujiwen laughed and said, right now the auction is for Confucian cultivators. Tao sect's items are very rare. What about the especially precious items? Perhaps at the end, fellow Taoist Xiao, please don't be impatient. I know. Xiaohua nodded and pointed outside the window saying, what I want to know now is, who is the owner of the last scroll? Which school is it from? The most famous of the 100 schools of Confucian cultivators are Confucian, Mahist, Legalist, Military, School of Famous, Yinyang, School of Vertical and Horizontal, School of Miscellaneous, School of Farmer, School of Novels, and School of Vertical and Horizontal. Just now 3 great Confucian scrolls appeared. School of Legalism, School of Yinyang, and School of Vertical and Horizontal. As for the 4th school, it's hard to guess. Fujiwen's curiosity was also great. He pinched his chin and looked at Yu Linfeng holding the 4th scroll in his hand. Yu Linfeng's face carried a trace of mystery. His hand was placed on the purple silk rope, but he didn't release it. Instead, he raised his head and looked around, saying with a smile, this last scroll, I don't know if it's out of everyone's expectations. Before Yu Linfeng finished speaking, his fingers shook. Boom, a violent vibration sounded, as if 10,000 horses were galloping. A 5-colored brilliance mixed with an indescribable noble spirit rushed out from the scroll. Xiaohua was used to seeing the brilliance of Taoist cultivators' treasures. This 5-colored brilliance didn't count as anything magical. But Fujiwen actually jumped up from his chair in shock, shouting in shock, This is Confucian's 5 cheese unifications? Sure enough, that 5-colored noble spirit rushed into the night sky, and actually formed an auspicious cloud several meters in size, illuminating half a mu of the sky. That 5-colored brilliance was different from when it rushed out just now. This time it was extremely gentle, even more silky than a lover's gaze. And above this auspicious cloud, endless starlight faintly sprinkled down, enveloping the auspicious cloud. It really is Confucian's 5 cheese unifications. Fujiwen raised his head and said excitedly, Zhai Xinglu is indeed amazing. To actually be able to find the authentic writings of Confucian great Confucians. Nowadays, on the hidden immortal continent, the authentic writings of Confucian great Confucians have long been extinct. That's right at this time, Xiaohua suddenly shouted in hindsight. Young Master Fu, you just said that there must be Confucian writings among the century-old theories. Is Confucian the same as Confucian cultivators? Hee, of course they're not the same. The excitement on Fu Jiwen's face hadn't disappeared, and he answered with a smile. Confucian cultivators are naturally a kind of cultivation method, just like what I just explained to fellow Taoist, using the noble spirit of heaven and earth as the foundation. And Confucian is a school of Confucian cultivators. It's just that the influence and scale of this school is far greater than the sum of the other schools. So this cultivation method is also called Confucian cultivators. It's not what fellow Taoist thinks, that Confucian cultivators are Confucian cultivators. At this point, Fu Jiwen smiled bitterly again, smacking his lips and saying, although that's the case in reality, Confucian cultivators account for 90% of Confucian cultivators. Saying that Confucian cultivators are Confucian cultivators is not impossible. Who was the great scholar who founded Confucian? Xiao Hua's eyes lit up, and he asked with extreme curiosity. Speaking of Confucian cultivators, Fu Jiwen was also in high spirits, and he spoke frankly with assurance. Confucian cultivators are one of the most important schools of thought in the 100 schools of thought. Confucian cultivators use the 6 arts as their method: advocate etiquette, music, benevolence, and righteousness. They advocate loyalty and forgiveness, and they advocate the golden mean. They advocate rule of virtue and benevolence. Confucian cultivators emphasize the function of education, and they believe that heavy education and light punishment is the only way for a country to be stable, and the people to be rich and happy. They advocate education without discrimination, and they should educate both the ruler and the ruled, so that the whole country from top to bottom becomes a person of high moral character. The founder of Confucian was surnamed Kong, and his name was Chiu. His courtesy name was Zhong. He was from Yu Province's Lu country, and after he founded the Confucian school, he was revered as Confucius. Today, he is respectfully called Eternal Paragon by the later generations of Hidden Immortal Continent. The core of his theory is benevolence. He advocates love, and demands that people should love each other and get along harmoniously. To realize benevolence, one must be tolerant of others, and do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. And the system or code of conduct that embodies benevolence is restrain oneself and return to etiquette. Confucius's works include poem, book, etiquette, music, and so on. These 5 books are the most famous, and they are often called the 5 classics by Hidden Immortal Continent. Other than Confucius, there are 2 other important figures in Confucian. One is Meng Ku, whose courtesy name is Ziyu. Senior Meng Ku advocates benevolence, and further proposes that the people are the most important, the state comes second, and the ruler is the least important. His ethics is good by nature. The other is Sun Kuang, and people at that time called him Sun Qing. He advocates benevolence and righteousness, and the way of the king, and using virtue to convince people. He also proposed that the ruler is the boat, and the commoners are the water. The water carries the boat, and it also capsizes the boat. These 2 were also respectfully called Zi by later generations, Mengzi and Sunzi. The 4 books that Hidden Immortal Continent often refers to, De Shui, the Golden Mean, the Analects, and Mengzi, were written by these 3 great scholars. Although the cultivation method of Confucian cultivators was passed down from ancient times, it doesn't matter what it was called in the beginning. After Confucian cultivators appeared, this cultivation method became Confucian cultivators. Xiao Hua understood and sighed. The influence of Confucian cultivators on Hidden Immortal Continent is so deep. These opinions and propositions, although they are not cultivation, they are enough to have an impact on cultivation. This 5 Qis unifications should be the manifestation of the noble Qi in the chest of Confucian cultivators being condensed to the extreme. Right? Fu Jiwen nodded and said, fellow Taoist Xiao is right. Confucian cultivators emphasize on entering the world, which is different from Taoist cultivators. Therefore, all Confucian cultivators have their own opinions to govern the country and educate the people. This is related to cultivation, but also has nothing to do with it. This 5 cheese unifications is the purpose of Confucian cultivators. As long as one cultivates to the realm of 5 cheese unifications, one's physical body can become a saint, and one can ascend. Hearing this, Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air, as if he had thought of an inconceivable question. He almost blurted out, "Then the place where Confucian cultivators ascend is the immortal world? Is this immortal world the same as the immortal world of Taoists?" Ha ha ha! Fu Jiwen laughed heartily. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, if you want me to answer this question, I'm afraid you have to wait for me to cultivate to the realm of 5 cheese unifications, ascend to the immortal world, and then return from the immortal world, right?" Hearing this, Xiaohua touched his nose and helplessly said, "This is indeed true." At this time, at the auction, the people who were as shocked as Fu Jiwen were also boiling with excitement. The people who were familiar with each other were not only whispering, but even the people who didn't know each other were also saying something loudly. If they weren't showing off their talent, then they were showing off their knowledge. Chapter 3283. Fellow immortals, you can see it clearly. Yu Linfeng loudly said. This is the word Confucian, written by the Confucian school's senior Kong Liwen. When he wrote this scroll, he had already stepped into the realm of literary star. Therefore, the auspicious clouds of the 5 cheese unifications can also attract the starlight from the sky to destroy evil and exorcise demons. If this book was written by Confucius, the sage Kong Liwen, it would definitely be a clear cloud with a righteous aura. Not to mention the starlight, even if one's eyesight was slightly poor, they might not be able to see it. Fu Jiwen sighed. Unfortunately, this one has only heard of it. This is the first time I've seen the handwriting of a great Confucian scholar. Oh, why is that? Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. The Confucian school emphasizes the path of the golden mean. The golden mean is impartial and without fault. The common principle is the natural order of the heavens, the pinnacle of subtlety. Confucius's righteous aura must be quiet and without a trace, without the smoke and fire of the mortal world. This one understands. Xiaohua nodded. Although he didn't quite understand the meaning of this sentence, within the Tao sect's magical techniques, the brilliant ones didn't necessarily have great power. It was precisely those magical techniques that contained terrifying power that were extremely restrained and wouldn't waste unnecessary spiritual qi. Seeing Yu Linfeng put away the scroll, the soaring righteous aura disappeared. Xiaohua heard the bidding sounds downstairs and his heart itched. He secretly pondered whether he should also get one to play with. Actually, this path of the golden mean originated from Confucius, but it flourished with Zhu Xi, old man Zhu. Fu Jiwen sorted out his mood, slowly sat down and said casually, "What? Zhu Xi? Old man Zhu?" Xiaohua heard this and was suddenly shocked. Is it the Confucian Zhu family? Oh, fellow Xiao actually knows about the Zhu family? Fu Jiwen was greatly surprised. Xiaohua laughed. Hee, this one can't possibly not know anything. I've heard of this Zhu family. I wonder how they are now. How are they now? A strange expression appeared on Fu Jiwen's face again. He looked out of the window and said, the Zhu clan has been passed down since ancient times and has lived in Wuyuan County of Xuzhou. Back then, Zhu Xi, old master Zhu's name shook the hidden immortal continent. He was known as another great master after Confucius who could be respected as Z. However, after the war between Confucianism and Buddhism, for some unknown reason, the once prosperous Zhu clan actually declined. In the end, it actually disappeared without a trace. Now, there are many surnames of Zhu on the hidden immortal continent, but I have never heard of anyone who is the true descendant of the Zhu clan. Xiaohua inwardly nodded his head. He already understood that the Zhu family had likely been annihilated by the Tao sect. Their descendants should have been cursed by the Tao sect experts, causing them to slowly decline. It's a pity that the Zhu family has been annihilated, and so has the Zhu family's academic legacy. Fu Jiwen's face was filled with regret. Even now, there are still many students who frequently travel to Xuzhou's Wuyuan County to study, hoping to discover the heritage of the Zhu clan. That inheritance is second only to Confucius's knowledge. If you can get it, It will definitely be an amazing achievement. Hee, obtaining and achieving are two different things. Xiaohua laughed. Fellow Daoist Xiao is right. But since you can get it, you might be able to break through the Zhu clan's academic legacy and become a great scholar. Fu Jiwen also nodded his head. Who wouldn't like this kind of temptation? It's still fame and fortune. Xiaohua bitterly smiled. While they were talking, the bidding for the authentic work of Senior Kong Liwen had finally reached the climax. Young Master Duanmu, who was opposite Xiaohua, seemed to be competing with another VIP on the third floor to raise the price, directly raising the price to a terrifying level. Unfortunately, in the end, young Master Duanmu actually had no choice but to give up when the other party only increased the price by one top-grade primeval stone. This made Xiaohua sigh endlessly. Perhaps the 3 top-grade primeval stones that Xiaohua used to obstruct him were the last few straws that broke the camel's back. The bidding for the authentic work of great scholar came to an end. The next bidding was still for the items of hidden immortal continent. However, these things were mostly refining techniques of imperial tools. Only some great refiners had use for them. Not only were there few people bidding, even Xiaohua was too lazy to listen. He could be considered to be proficient in the refining techniques of Dao sect and soul cultivators. He also knew a lot of refining techniques of the devil world. Imperial tools. In essence, most of them were derived from Dao sect's tools. Xiaohua could refine spirit tools. Why would he be greedy for the refining techniques of imperial tools? Young Master Fu Xiaohua raised his hand and took out some spirit fruits from the space. He handed them to Fu Jiwen and said, "Try these spirit fruits, and then continue to analyze the remaining 10 great imperial tools with this Xiao." Okay. Fu Jiwen clapped his hands and took the spirit fruit. He gently took a bite, tasted it, and said, "Can I bring some back?" "Of course you can." Xiaohua nodded his head. However, these spirit fruits are full of heaven and earth primeval qi. People without cultivation are not suitable to eat. This one understands. Fu Jiwen carefully received some and replied, "My wife likes these things, but this one is incompetent and can hardly satisfy her request." "Oh, so it's like that." Xiaohua understood and said enviously, "It's rare for your wife to be so loving, so this Xiao won't help you?" Then, with a wave of Xiaohua's hand, a large pile of spirit fruits appeared on the table, as if they didn't cost primeval stones. "Ah, this is too much." Fu Jiwen was shocked and hurriedly refused. "It's okay, it's just some snacks. Young Master Fu, take it and eat." Xiaohua casually waved his hand. "This Xiao has troubled you for so long, I'm sorry." "Alright." Fu Jiwen was really moved in his heart, and happily put all the spirit fruits into his small universe bag. Then he took out a bright red fruit and said while eating, "Ranked above the mysterious demon chess are the tranquil flute and the heavenly sound zither. The reason why these 2 imperial equipment are placed together is because these 2 imperial equipment were used by the people of the Immortal Palace before the Golden Boy and Jade Girl were conferred into the Immortal Palace. Just now, didn't this one tell fellow Xiao that this music is one of the 5 classics of the Confucian school? And the art of music is also one of the compulsory lessons for students? The tranquil flute and the heavenly sound zither are imperial equipment that mainly use sound attacks. Of course, if we were to simply talk about the power of these 2 imperial equipment, I personally believe that they cannot be compared to the demon and god chess. Perhaps it is because everyone thinks that these 2 imperial equipment are elegant, so they place them on the demon and god chess. Speaking of the tranquil flute and the heavenly sound zither, naturally there is a story that everyone knows. Fu Jiwen said again. In the early years, the Golden Boy and Jade Girl didn't know each other, and they were also enemies. When the 2 were young, they met in the same academy. It wasn't love at first sight, but after a long time, the 2 gradually developed feelings for each other. However, when the 2 were ready to reveal their relationship, they were discovered by their families. The 2 finally understood that their lovers were enemies, and under the opposition of the 2 families, the 2 couldn't get married. Therefore, the 2 had no choice but to stop their studies and fly away. However, since the seed of love was planted, it was inevitable that it would sprout. When the seed grew into a big tree, the Golden Boy and Jade Girl couldn't help but inquire about the other party's situation. When the two found out that the other party had rejected countless marriage proposals, and even Jade Girl didn't hesitate to fight with her life, the two's hearts suddenly softened. Just when the two were about to get in touch, the war between the two families broke out. The two families fought in a dangerous situation and killed each other. Many of their elders died, and even if the two were in love with each other, they were forced to act against each other's families. At the end of the bloody battle, the two finally met, but the two couldn't bear to kill each other. At the crucial moment, the two stepped into the trap set by the two families in advance, and prepared to go to the Yellow Springs together. This trap was set up by taking advantage of the danger of foreign objects. After the two fell into the dangerous situation, everyone thought that the two would die without a doubt. But after they fought a bloody battle for a night, they saw the inside of the dangerous situation shine brightly, and then a wonderful music like the sound of nature came out from inside. That music was like rain, and erased the blood in everyone's heart. That music was like the sound of heaven, and all the dead souls were transcended. In this music, everyone was remorseful, and everyone was reflecting. When the music was over, the two families didn't want to kill each other anymore. They shook hands and made peace, and vowed to be good for their families. When the two families made the vow, the Golden Boy and Jade Girl each took the tranquil heart flute and heavenly melody zither, and flew out of the dangerous situation. The two were in love, and their love was stronger than gold. In the case of dying for love, the heavens were moved, and they actually obtained two imperial equipment in this dangerous situation. It was also these two who relied on these imperial equipment to change the blood feud between the two families. When the two cultivated to the 5-chi unification realm, they received the conferring document from the Immortal Palace, and entered the Immortal Palace to serve. Made up. Hearing Fujiwen's words, Xiaohua unrestrainedly asserted, "Not only is this story cliché, it's also full of flaws." Not to mention that when the two met in the academy, they didn't inquire about each other's background, and not to mention that the two were able to walk together in the battle between the two families, and went into the dangerous situation together. Just this imperial equipment, it's impossible to control it right away. The final ending is even more bullshit. I'm afraid that the old woman gave the name of the Immortal Palace to her young granddaughter to make them happy, right? Fujiwen shrugged and said with a smile, "Maybe. But this story has been circulating in the hidden immortal continent for many years, and no one doubted it. Also, the tranquil heart flute and heavenly melody zither. These two imperial equipment are indeed from the Immortal Palace. It's said that when the Immortal Palace sent soldiers to capture the demons who didn't submit to the Immortal Palace, someone personally saw the power of these two imperial equipment. That's what the Immortal Palace used to trick people, to make people admire the Immortal Palace." Xiaohua pointed with his hand and said downstairs, "Just like this Yulinfeng, saying so much, isn't it just to make people pay more origin stones?" Ha ha ha, Fujiwen laughed, because downstairs, Fujiwen was bidding for a phoenix tail zither, and was exaggerating. Chapter 3284. By the way, what do you mean by Immortal Palace capturing unruly demons? Xiaohua asked in confusion. Does Immortal Palace still care about Hidden Immortal Continent? Hidden Immortal Continent has tens of thousands of countries and hundreds of millions of people, Fujiwen explained. These ordinary governance rights are all in the hands of the kings of the 10,000 countries. Immortal Palace naturally won't intervene. Even if the country's power changes, Immortal Palace still won't care. Even if a power different from Confucian cultivators appears, Immortal Palace may not intervene. But if these powers openly compete with Immortal Palace, openly oppose Confucian cultivators, and openly slaughter Confucian cultivators, then Immortal Palace will definitely kill them. According to what I know, 800 years ago, in the Yong province, there was a powerful bull demon who wanted to establish his own empire. Moreover, he treated the common people of the Yong province as his food. This angered the Immortal Palace, and they sent troops to kill that bull demon. Oh, isn't Bull Demon a demon of Thousand Demons' sacred realm? Can Immortal Palace just kill it? Xiaohua asked in surprise. The real demons of Thousand Demons' sacred realm have never disdained to come to Hidden Immortal Continent and Western Paradise. The demons that can appear in Hidden Immortal Continent are not the orthodox demons of Thousand Demons Sacred Realm. Moreover, Thousand Demons Sacred Realm's Great Sage Palace has also publicly announced that any demon that enters Hidden Immortal Continent and Western Paradise will be killed without mercy. Fujiwen said with a smile. So Immortal Palace also didn't show mercy to this bull demon. So that's how it is. Xiaohua understood. When he was about to ask what the number 1 ranked Imperial equipment was, Yu Linfeng pressed his hand down. The Hidden Immortal Continent's light ball that was just flickering with brilliance immediately dimmed, and the light ball next to it started to glow. Fellow Immortals, all the rare items of Hidden Immortal Continent's Confucian cultivators have been sold. Now I will take out some rare items from Western Paradise, please bid. As Yu Linfeng's voice fell, dang dang, dang, the sound of the wooden fish rang out from the ball of light, and the complete Sanskrit chants rang out at the same time. Amitba, the old monks who were sitting steadily, had no choice but to put their palms together and stand up to shout. Namo Amitba, a Buddhist chant resounded throughout the entire place. The ball of light suddenly expanded and turned into a barefooted Buddha that was several feet tall. He stood in the air, and the swastika character between his brows and the benevolence in his slightly opened eyes instantly attracted everyone's attention. Swoosh, the barefoot Buddha waved his hand, and it came crashing down like a mountain. Dang, 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 a series of hurried sounds of the wooden fish rang out again, and then there was a deathly silence. Whether it was the wooden fish or the Sanskrit chanting, both had disappeared. As the Buddha's huge hand pressed down, the entire Buddha flickered with golden light, and in a breath's time, it turned into fireflies. The fireflies danced in the air for a moment, and then condensed into the outline of the Nirvana world. Just like before, there were more than 10 slightly larger balls of light. These balls of light were different from the ones in the Hidden Immortal Continent. There were no other colors, only pure Buddhist light. Namo Amitba, several old monks chanted in unison. As I heard, for a time, Bagafan lived at the top of the Eagle Peak in the royal residence city, along with a group of 1,250 people. They were all arhats, and they were all exhausted. No more worries, truly free. Their hearts were good, and their wisdom was good, like a wise horse or a great dragon. What they had done, they had abandoned all burdens, they had grasped their own benefits, and they were all tied up. They knew that they were free, and their hearts were free. Apart from Ananda, they lived alone and learned to obtain the fruit of pre-flow. Mahakasayapa was the highest. Several old monks were solemn as they chanted Buddhist scriptures. The entire auction house was silent for a moment, and then there was a lot of noise. Clearly, these Confucian cultivators were not very interested in Buddhism. Yu Linfeng had an apologetic smile on his face. He raised his hand and saluted to his left and right. My Hidden Immortal Continent is a land of etiquette. Since there are treasures of Buddhism here, we naturally have to respect them. We will wait for a moment, and it won't be too late to bid after these masters finish chanting. Yu Linfeng, hurry up. It's already late. I still have to go back and meditate with my beautiful concubine. Who's here to listen to their nonsense for no reason? Who would have thought that just as Yu Linfeng's voice fell, an irritable voice rang out. Not only was it blaming Yu Linfeng, it was also ridiculing Buddhism's old monks. Yu Linfeng saw that everyone was unhappy and bitterly smiled. Since it's like this, then I will start bidding. With that, Yu Linfeng grabbed with his hand, and a Buddhist light flew out from the outline of the Pure Land and landed in front of Yu Linfeng. When the Buddhist light faded away, it was a monk's staff. That monk's staff had 6 dragons coiled around it, and each dragon head was extremely ferocious. Where was the benevolent appearance of Buddhism? This is one of the 18 treasures of the Pure Land. It is said to be the personal item of the famous Buddhist monk, Miaochen. These 6 dragons are the protectors of Buddhism. This monk's staff has the power of 6 dragons after using Buddhism's secret technique. And with this 6-dragon monk's staff, one can also ride the wind. Yu Linfeng gave a brief introduction, then continued. I'm afraid that only Buddhism's experts can clearly see the mysteries of this monk's staff. I'm not fated with Buddhism, so I can't explain it clearly. The starting price of this monk's staff is 10 upper-grade vitality stones, and each increment is 1 upper-grade vitality stone. I invite the fated person to make a bid. Just as Yu Linfeng finished speaking, someone immediately raised their hand to bid, out of Xiaohua's expectations. Strange. Xiaohua laughed. Weren't there a lot of people making a racket just now? Why didn't they wait for these monks to finish reciting the scriptures before making a move? Could it be that they're trying to sell dog meat under false pretenses? This Fujiwen looked around and hesitated. He whispered, I'm not sure about this situation. I remember that when I came down last time, there were very few people bidding for these Buddhist artifacts. Most of them weren't sold. Perhaps these people were planted by Zhai Xinglu? Xiaohua frowned. They want the old monks of Buddhism to pay more vitality stones. Not necessarily. Fujiwen shook his head. These old monks of Buddhism don't care about ordinary Buddhist artifacts. They're eager to throw the Buddhist artifacts, scriptures, and Buddhas from nirvana to hidden immortal continent. What they care about are the relics of the eminent monks. Although those relics contain the psyche power of the eminent monks, most of it is the karma of the eminent monks. These karma are extremely difficult to control, and can only be transcended using Buddhism. If it's obtained by someone with ill intentions, it may have an adverse effect on Buddhism. Moreover, relics are also the bodies of the eminent monks. Buddhism won't let them wander outside, and want to bring them back to nirvana to be buried. And Xiaohua nodded. If that's the case, these bidders should have the cultivation of Buddhism. I'm afraid that's the case. Seeing the auction gradually becoming lively, Fujiwen sighed. Buddhism's invasion of Confucian cultivators is very serious. Bronze Pillar country strictly forbids Taoist and Buddhist temples, but it can't stop Confucian cultivators from practicing Buddhism's cultivation methods. Many Confucian cultivators who can't make any progress in Confucian cultivation may turn their eyes to Taoist and Buddhist sects, wanting to use them to advance their cultivation. And Buddhism's cultivation methods and heart sutras have always been given away casually. Confucian cultivators with cultivation experience can easily enter the sect. In the long run, hidden immortal continent's Confucian cultivators will no longer be Confucian. Young Master Fu, Xiaohua said with a smile. Don't ask others to worry. Don't you also have the cultivation of Taoist? Fujiwen hesitated slightly and shook his head slightly. My situation is different from theirs and also different from fellow Xiao. Alright. Xiaohua didn't pursue the matter. After all, this matter already involved Fujiwen's secret. But at this moment, Xiaohua suddenly thought of something. Oh right, young Master Fu, didn't you say that there would be flying imperial devices from hidden immortal continent? Why aren't there any? The last time I came, I saw Bright Moon Palace bid for quite a few flying imperial devices. This time, I'm afraid there aren't any left? Fujiwen said hesitantly. Or perhaps, when the last few imperial devices are up for auction, we'll bid again? Forget it, let's wait and see. Xiaohua nodded and looked at the auction. After the 6 dragon staff, there were some other Buddhist artifacts or prayer beads, or alms bowls or incense burners. There was even a water bottle with a willow stuck on it. Seeing the aqua vase appear, Xiaohua almost jumped up. However, when he saw the numerous sprouts on the willow tree that were trying their best to grow, he sat down. It was very obvious that the willow tree branch was a living thing. Perhaps it was broken off by some little bird at dusk, and inserted into the aqua vase. After thinking for a while, Xiaohua asked again, Young Master Fu, do you know what the Buddhist sect's Bhikkhu's 18 objects are? Of course I know. Fujiwen said very casually. The 18 objects are the 18 objects that Buddhist sect's eminent monks often carry with them. These 18 objects are the Buddhist sect's eminent monks' protection. Unfortunately, one of them has committed a minor sin. Among them there are 3 grades: heavy, medium, and light. That is, Li San Yi is shedding, which is a heavy sin. Li Bo is Tuji Luo, which is a medium sin. The rest are light sins. These ordinary Buddhist sect monks only use 6 kinds of things: Li San Yi, Li Bo, and water pouch. These 6 kinds of things are known as the Bhikkhu's 6 objects. Although this humble one did not deliberately listen to these things, the monks who are everywhere often preach them. This humble one listened and understood. Immediately after, Fujiwen looked at the kasaya that he was bidding for. He pointed at it and said, "In fact, these 18 objects are what ordinary people need in life. They are yangji, which is a wooden chip used to remove the stench in the mouth. Bathing bean, which is a powder ground from soybeans, beans, and peas, which is used for bathing and washing. Li san-i, which refers to the 3 kinds of clothes of Sunga, Yudoro, and Antua. Libo, which refers to the army's 3 kinds of clothes. Libo, which is a water bottle used to hold water for washing or drinking. Libo, which is also known as a measuring vessel, which is used to hold food. Libo, which is a cloth on the ground or on the bed when sitting or lying down. Libo, which is a staff with a libo on the head. When walking, the libo vibrates to alert people of insects on the road, or when begging to attract people's attention. Incense burner, which is an instrument used to burn incense and invite Buddhas. Libo, which is also known as a water filter, a cloth used to filter insects in water. Libo, which is a cloth used to wipe hands, including face wipes, body wipes, and feet wipes. Knife, which is used to cut clothes, shave hair, and cut claws. Libo, which is a flintlock used to strike a fire. Libo, which is a tool used to pluck out nose hairs or thorns. Libo, which is a bed made of rope, which is convenient for sitting in meditation. Chapter 3285. So that's how it is. Xiaohua stared blankly for a moment before bursting into laughter. I thought the 18 objects were some profound things, but it turns out, it's just like this. However, the Buddhist artifacts of the Buddhist sect need to be supported by the Buddhist Dharma. They need to be constantly nourished by their psyche power, so most of the Buddhist artifacts come from these 18 objects. Fujiwen pointed out the strangeness. Because these 18 objects don't leave the monk's side every day. Forget it, thinking about the kasaya on top of his Buddha Sarira, the 9-dragon staff, and even the clear water bottle, all of which were things that the old monk never left his body for who knows how many years ago. Xiaohua felt a bit sick of them. However, since they were all worn by the Buddha Sarira, Xiaohua didn't think of throwing them away. The fun is here. Just when Xiaohua was feeling disgusted by the Buddhist artifacts and was somewhat distracted, Fujiwen suddenly stood up from the chair and walked to the window with a smile. Oh, Xiaohua was also curious. He looked outside and saw that there were dozens of jade boxes lined up in front of Yulinfeng. Each jade box was wide open, and inside were sariras as big as chicken eggs and as small as soybeans. These sariras were of different quality. Some emitted pure Buddhist light, while others emitted multicolored light. Not only Xiaohua, who had already condensed a 4th-stage lotus platform, could tell at a glance, but even a Confucian scholar who didn't have the cultivation of a Buddhist sect could also tell. However, Yulinfeng's voice sounded again. Fellow immortals, these are the sariras of the Buddhist monks that my Zhai Xing Lu painstakingly found near Yu province. As for the use of these sariras, there are Buddhist monks here, so I can't say it clearly. However, if there's anyone who doesn't know, you can go to my Zhai Xing Lu's place to look for it. All I have to say is that the Buddhist light is incomparably pure, and can perfectly blend with the righteous energy of my Confucian cultivator. The base price of each of these Buddhist relics is 1 top-grade primeval stone. Damn it, Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This is the hidden immortal continent, 1 top-grade primeval stone. What kind of concept is that? Just now, the true work of the great Confucian scholar only used a top-grade primeval stone as the base price. How could these relics have a base price of 1 top-grade primeval stone? What was more special was that these relics were of different qualities. Zhai Xing Lu's starting price was 1 supreme-grade primordial stone. Wasn't that clearly bullying? However, someone had really stepped forward to be bullied by Zhai Xing Lu. As soon as Yulinfeng finished speaking, a voice shouted, "I'll add 10 top-grade source stones for that untainted relic. This old man will add 50 upper-grade primordial stones. No, a relic of this quality can raise my nature energy by 2 grades. I'll give you 2 supreme-grade primordial stones." Fujiwen laughed. These people are really not afraid of trouble. Last time, When everyone made fun of these old monks, they still cared about their reputation and added upper-grade primordial stones one by one. This time, they actually added 2 top-grade primordial stones at once. Are they sure that these old monks are going to take action? Xiaohua faintly smiled and asked, if the old monk were to go into silent meditation, this Xiao would like to see how they will deal with this. That won't happen. Fujiwen shook his head and said, Buddhism emphasizes that monks don't lie. Whatever they say should definitely be believed. According to this one's knowledge, every time Zhaixing Lu holds this kind of auction, they will definitely be present. All the relics will never be left behind. All of them will be bought by them. If monks don't lie? Say that again after you've seen people like Hanju? Xiaohua was rather disapproving of this sentence, but hearing the end, Xiaohua was flabbergasted. Then how much primordial stones will they spend? Fujiwen snorted and said, fellow Taoist Xiao, why don't you see who is behind them? Who? Xiaohua seemed to have understood something, but he still asked. Behind them are the kind men and women of Burial Immortal Continent and Western Paradise Continent. The daily offerings of these trillions of kind men and women are unimaginable to ordinary people. These monks are relying on these offerings to straighten their backs and dare to challenge here. This is why they dare to say that every relic must be bought. Fujiwen sneered. It is also because of this, the relics here, these monks must buy them. Otherwise, they won't be able to answer to these kind men and women. Sai Xiaohua listened and looked at the several monks whose expressions were calm, as if they were not affected by the increasing bidding price of the relics. He sighed and said, respectfully welcoming the relics of the eminent monks back to Western Paradise Continent, and letting the departed souls of these eminent monks rest in peace. This is originally a very good thing. If both sides were kind, it would be a good thing. But now one side is trying their best to raise the price, secretly rejoicing in their own gains, while the other side is fearless and unhesitatingly taking out the offerings of others. This is already not a good thing to respectfully welcome, but an evil thing to flaunt. I'm afraid this is one of the methods Buddhism uses to attract believers in Burial Immortal Continent, right? Fujiwen thought carefully, and of course also felt sad. He nodded and said, fellow Taoist Xiao is right. Even if this one is just a bystander, watching the show, it seems like I'm also helping the tyrant. That's natural. Xiaohua nodded and looked at the entire Bright Moon Palace. And this Zhaixing Lu is the chief evil and also the instigator. The secular people are right. Money is the source of all evil. Zhaixing Lu accumulates wealth like this at this point. Fujiwen did not dare to talk nonsense anymore. Seeing that the monk from the Buddhist sect did not respond, the several Confucian scholars who had been aggressively bidding immediately lost their confidence. They began to raise the price one by one. However, the number of people who raised the price also decreased. Quite a number of people chose to withdraw. After all, not everyone was willing to try this kind of stimulation that was similar to beating drums and passing flowers. Amitba suddenly, one of the few old monks who looked relatively young, took a step forward. He put his palms together and bowed to the surroundings. These relics are something that my Buddhist sect must obtain. I'm sure everyone already knows that. As for the meaning of the relics, this old monk also does not want to say much. These are the wandering souls of my Buddhism sect. This old monk is under the orders of the Buddha Lord to welcome them back to Western Paradise Continent. These relics can increase a Confucian cultivator's noble spirit, but correspondingly, the negative karma in the relics will also be added to the cultivator's body. Everyone here does not understand the secret arts of my Buddhism sect, and does not know how to eliminate negative karma and get rid of negative karma. In the future, you will definitely be tired of this negative karma. Therefore, this old monk advises everyone here that greed is easy to breed and negative karma is difficult to eliminate. Practicing honestly is the right path. As he spoke, the monk pointed at the dozens of relics floating in the air. These are the wandering souls of my Buddhist sect's Arhat. My Buddha Lord is willing to redeem each wandering soul with 3 supreme-grade primordial stones. If anyone here is willing to pay a higher price than my Buddhism sect, then please go ahead. My Arhat's wandering souls cannot rest in peace in Western Paradise Continent. My Buddhist sect's hundreds of millions of benefactors who sincerely worship Buddha will also not be at ease. This monk upstairs, Fujiwen was stunned. He actually dares to threaten? Looks like the Buddhism sect also has no surplus food. Xiaohua sighed and looked at Yulinfeng. He knew this monk's threat was nothing. The only one who would suffer losses was Zhai Xinglu. Yulinfeng's brows frowned a little. Then he laughed and said loudly, "The Buddhist sect's master has already made a big bid. I wonder which immortal friend wants to increase the price? How can there be anyone who wants to charge forward?" Fu Jiwen lost interest and walked back to the chair from the window. He sat down and said, "This is hundreds of supreme-grade primordial stones. Who can afford it?" Just now, this monk already said those harsh words. If some idiot increases the price by one supreme-grade primordial stone, and these monks really give up, wouldn't this idiot cry himself to death? What if I take this idiot? Xiaohua looked at the dozens of relics, his heart beating wildly, and he almost blurted out. "Tch, Fujiwen was disdainful. Fellow Taoist Xiao is neither a Confucian cultivator, nor a member of the Buddhism sect. Why would you take this idiot? If you want to be, it should be someone from Zhai Xinglu." His Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air, and hurriedly suppressed the greed in his heart. Nonsense, it was a blessing to have 3 cultivators, but from another point of view, it was a great tragedy. In this conflict between Confucians and Buddhists, he might be caught in the middle. He might as well be a Taoist loose cultivator. Why would he expose his Buddhism sect cultivation for no reason? "That's true," Xiaohua nodded and looked at the scene. He smiled and said, "I bet that Zhai Xinglu will definitely test it out." Fu Jiwen shook his head slightly. "I don't think so, because there's really no need. Let's wait and see." Xiaohua smiled but didn't say anything. Sure enough, after Yulinfeng's words fell, no one spoke. After half a cup of tea's time, Yulinfeng said helplessly, "If no one bids, this old man will add 3 supreme-grade primordial stones for each relic." A slightly shaky voice came from downstairs. "Damn it!" Fu Jiwen almost jumped out of his chair. "This is too fake. The people downstairs, can they have hundreds of supreme-grade primordial stones? According to the rules, they have no right to bid at all." "Haha, there's no need to be so angry." Xiaohua smiled. "This is just like how young Master Duanmu tested me. Zhai Xinglu must give the Buddhism sect face, and the Buddhism sect must give Zhai Xinglu an answer. This auction is just a question and answer, nothing more. And this Xiao is sure that the bidder will definitely get something from this supreme-grade primordial stone." Sure enough, just as Xiaohua thought, the monk said lightly, "This old monk will add 1 supreme-grade primordial stone for each relic." That person didn't make a sound. Yulinfeng laughed and waved his hand. The dozens of jade boxes closed at the same time, and flew to the monk. The monk bowed and said, "Ba, many thanks to Zhai Xinglu for your help." Chapter 3286. With a wave of the monk's yellow robes, the dozens of jade boxes disappeared at the same time. Then, with another wave of his hand, a small cosmos bag flew out of his sleeve and slowly landed in front of Yulinfeng. "This is the ransom for the dozens of Buddhas. Yulinfeng, please check it." "Monks don't lie. I know that." Yulinfeng naturally wouldn't check it and accepted it with a smile. Then, when he saw the old monks turn around and leave without a word, he hurriedly shouted, "I'll see you off, masters." Ba, the monks left, but a Buddhist chant that was as clear as spring water was left in the auction. Haha, an eminent monk is indeed an eminent monk. Although this Buddhist chant didn't contain a trace of psychokinesis, it was enough to hear one's heart. Yulinfeng hurriedly laughed and said, "They turned around and left without leaving a speck of dust behind. Since the masters have left, Zhai Xinglu's auction is about to end. The treasures from the Pure Land have already fallen to the ground. Zhai Xinglu still has some items from the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm. However, the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm is too dangerous for the human race. These items are not even comparable to the ones from the Pure Land. Of course, these few items are definitely the best of the best. That's why Zhai Xinglu has always placed the items from the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm at the end of the auction." "Come on," Yulinfeng finished speaking and waved his hand. Caw, a bird's cry that shook the entire place was suddenly heard. An extremely small light spot flew over from afar. In the blink of an eye, the light spot transformed into a bird that was several feet large. This bird looked like an eagle, but it wore a golden crown on its head. Under the golden crown, the majestic eagle's eyes shone with a light that couldn't be looked at directly. Boom! The bird spread its wings as it landed, and thousands of streams of light flew out from its huge wings. When the bird stretched its neck and let out a long cry, the thousands of streams of light rushed into the outline of the thousand demons' sacred realm, and turned into a few spots of light. Fellow Taoist Xiao on the balcony, Fujiwen smiled bitterly. I lost the bet earlier. I admit defeat. Haha, actually you didn't lose. Xiao Hua looked at the bird's shadow with interest and said with a smile, it's just that you never had the chance to come into contact with these scheming people, so you don't know what they're thinking. A loss is a loss. Fujiwen waved his hand. Fine, since you've lost, then tell me, what is the name of this bird? Why can it replace the thousand demons' sacred realm? Xiao Hua pointed. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, Fujiwen actually shook his head and said, I know very little about the thousand demons' sacred realm, and I don't know what this flying beast is. If I'm not wrong, then this beast should be a great sage of the thousand demons' sacred realm. Only a great sage can represent the thousand demons' sacred realm. Alright, then what is a great sage? Saints are supreme beings. Fujiwen explains, our hidden immortal continent's saints are supreme beings in the human realm. The great sage of the thousand demons' sacred realm is the title of the most powerful demon. Xiao Hua was naturally not satisfied with this kind of answer. He waved his hand and said, if you don't know, then you don't know. It seems like you really don't know. It's not just me who doesn't know, Fujiwen said with a smile. The thousand demons' sacred realm is a place where thousands of demons gather. If we humans go there, we'll be their food. In my hidden immortal continent, other than the great grandmaster and above seniors who have the qualifications to explore the thousand demons' sacred realm, no one else has ever been there. If fellow Xiao asks 100 people, it's already not bad if one person can answer clearly. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore. Xiao Hua smiled faintly. You better reveal the mystery of the top 10 Imperial equipment. I'm looking forward to it. I wonder what the number 1 Imperial equipment will be. What can it be? Fujiwen smiled mysteriously and said, fellow Xiao has never practiced martial arts before, so I'm afraid you don't know what it means to practice the blade for 100 days, practice the spear for 1,000 days, practice the sword for 10,000 days, right? Xiao Hua was startled and asked curiously, could it be that young Master Fu has practiced martial arts before? Of course. Fujiwen said proudly, hidden immortal continent's Confucian scholars all have to practice the 6 arts. Martial arts, sword arts, and so on are all things that must be learned. I understand. Xiao Hua nodded. The top of the top 10 imperial equipment is the sword. Right. Fujiwen said with a smile. The sword is an ancient sacred item, the most revered and noble, worshipped by humans and gods. It's the ancestor of short weapons, a weapon for close combat. With its profound Dao skills, it became a legend. In fact, because it's light and convenient to carry, it's beautiful to wear, and it's quick to use, the hidden immortal continent's various dynasties, princes, emperors, marquises, scholars, swordsmen, merchants, and commoners, all of them take pride in it. Since ancient times, the sword and its skills have been unhindered in the battlefield, dominating the martial arts world, establishing a country, and upholding justice. Thus, it has been passed down to this day, and is still loved by the people of the world. With its glorious history, it's deeply rooted in people's hearts, and can be passed down without decline. The top of the top 10 imperial equipment is precisely the tender-like water sword. Tender-like water. Sword. Xiao Hua seemed to have understood something. Since ancient times, the most difficult thing to erase is the grace of a beauty. The sorrow of a beauty's feelings is like flowing water. If it can't be cut off, it will be chaotic. This tender-like water sword is truly outstanding. That's right. This tender-like water sword is like its name, a soft sword. The entire sword is transparent like water. When placed in water, it's the same as water. The sword's body is warm. After this sword is cut off, it can automatically fuse back together. Just like feelings. It can't be truly cut off. I'm afraid it's not that simple, Xiao Hua said thoughtfully. If it's only like this, how can it be the number one imperial equipment? The sharpest thing in this world is tenderness, and the most hurtful thing in this aristocratic family is also tenderness. This tender like water sword can open the heavens with water droplets. When Fu Jiwen talked about tenderness, his eyes unexpectedly also showed tenderness. As long as there are still feelings in their hearts, they can't escape the attack of this tender like water sword. It's said that in the past, the hidden immortal continent's pear blossom fairy was injured and abandoned by the nobles of the immortal palace. In a rage, she held the tender like water sword and killed her way to the immortal palace. In front of the southern heavenly gate, her sword soared through the sky and annihilated tens of thousands of heavenly soldiers. When Empress Dowager led the immortal palace's Star River to kill the fairy's sword cut the Star River into two. Unfortunately, this tender like water sword was broken by the starlight in the Star River, and turned into a morning star that disappeared into the horizon. The pear blossom fairy even charged into the Star River with hatred, and her body and soul were destroyed. From then on, no matter what imperial equipment was born, it would be difficult for it to surpass. This tender like water sword has always been listed as the number one imperial equipment. Xiao Hua sighed. This is another sad but beautiful story. I wonder if this story is the number one imperial equipment story? Or is it tender like water sword that is the number one imperial equipment? What's the difference? Fu Jiwen laughed. The things you can't get are always the best. The faintly discernible legends are always the most beautiful. The memories in a person's heart are always the most profound. Strange, hearing this, Xiao Hua suddenly thought of his own wishful staff and immediately interrupted. The ancestor of short weapons, the staff is also the number one weapon. Why isn't there a staff in the top 10 imperial equipment? Staff? Fu Jiwen scratched his head and laughed. Fellow Taoist Xiao must be joking. A staff, isn't it just a staff? How can it be in the top 10 imperial equipment? Forget it, I won't play the lute to a cow with you. Xiao Hua casually waved his hand, but before he could continue, his expression changed and he hurriedly looked at the auction hall. In front of Yu Linfeng, there was a jade slip. That's right, it was a jade slip commonly seen in the Donrain continent. At this moment it was floating in front of Yu Linfeng. Yu Linfeng said, "Fellow Taoists, this item is the jade I used by the ancient Taoists before they were destroyed by us Confucian cultivators. It should have been placed in the Taoist trifling item auction, but because this item was obtained from the Thousand Demons sacred realm, it wasn't taken out until now. This item's inspection method is different from the jade eye. After Zhaixing Lu obtained it, we searched through the ancient records and found out that this item was called a jade slip. After that, Zhaixing Lu specially found a Taoist expert and used their unique divine sense to inspect it. Only then did we find out that it was a 5 elements escape technique. Oh, to be more specific, it should be a commonly seen high-level escape technique in the hidden immortal continent called the water avoidance technique. This item is really rare. At least, I've never heard of it before. According to the person who inspected it, after practicing this escape technique, one can borrow the water of heaven and earth's spiritual energy to fly. It's even more powerful than us using the water avoidance technique to travel in the Jianghu. When the Taoist sect was flourishing, it must have been extremely precious. However, now that the Taoist sect has declined, according to that person, there isn't even a person who can use the elementary water escape technique. How could there be someone who needs this higher-level escape technique? Even when Zhaixing Lu saw that this item was of little value and wanted to sell it to that person bitterly smiled and refused. Thus, Zhaixing Lu could only bring it here to bid. It's a bit strange. Although Xiao Hua was excited, he had already calmed down. He pinched his chin and said curiously, "Why did this guy say such a secret so clearly? Isn't he afraid that no one will bid?" Haha. Fu Jiwen at the side laughed and said, "This is the third time I've heard this. This whatever jade slip is the same as the amplifying thunder wood that I want. No one will bid for it. If not for it being more rare than the amplifying thunder wood, and having a higher base price, this guy would have already taken it out when the bidding started. What's the base price of this item? Xiaohua hurriedly asked. 1 piece of top-grade primeval stone. Fu Jiwen was really familiar with it and said without hesitation. Xiaohua cursed loudly. Damn it, this is indeed a rare item worth hoarding. This kind of broken jade slip is actually sold for 1 piece of top-grade primeval stone? Yes, this item is just like the golden core cultivation method. In some people's eyes, this item is trash. But in the eyes of others, this item is a peerless treasure. Zhai Xinglu fancied this point, and would rather smash it in their hands than lower the price. The base price of this jade slip is 50 top-grade primeval stones. Without waiting for Fu Jiwen to finish speaking, Yu Linfeng cut the base price of the jade slip in half. Damn it, Fu Jiwen immediately jumped up. This young master has waited for this auction 3 times, and that amplifying thunder didn't even lower the price of a single primeval stone. How can this jade slip be lowered just like that? This is too unfair. Chapter 3287. Hee, it's not unfair. It's your bad character. Xiaohua smiled and raised his hand. I bid 51 high-grade source stones. Oh fellow Xiao. Fu Jiwen hurriedly shouted. You bid too early, others can see that you're determined to get it. That's right. Since I'm determined to get it, then I naturally have to let others know. Xiaohua squinted his eyes and looked at the opposite side, where Duanmu young master was. 52 high-grade source stones. Sure enough, Duanmu young master's voice leisurely came. Xiaohua confidently said. 53 Fu Jiwen naturally understood Xiaohua's meaning. This Duanmu young master was probably the biggest obstacle to Xiaohua bidding for this jade slip, or even the only obstacle. No matter when Xiaohua opened his mouth, Duanmu young master would definitely return the favor from last time. Since that was the case, why didn't Xiaohua open his mouth earlier? What a pity. Fu Jiwen stomped his feet. Fellow Xiao, I'm afraid there are even better things later. You let him return it too early. Not early, not early. Xiaohua also leisurely said. I've benefited a lot from this auction. This item will be the last item to bid. I won't be able to use any of the items in the future. Besides, even if there are more in the future, I'll just continue to bid. Who would be afraid of them? Sure enough, just as Xiaohua thought, Duanmu young master only bid once and didn't say anything else. It seemed to be to return Xiaohua's favor. And somewhere in Bright Moon Palace, Zhu Qing, who had been watching the entire auction with a sullen face, sighed again. Such a good favor. Why let it go so easily? Could it be that Xiaohua really needs this jade slip? And his strength is so strong that he's not afraid of the Duanmu family? Okay, this senior bids 53 high-grade source stones. Yu Linfeng saw that the useless jade slip was finally sold as he wished, and couldn't help but be overjoyed. He clapped his hands and said, if no one bids, this item will be this senior's. 55 high-grade source stones. Just as Xiaohua was about to call out Xiao Yi with a smile, another voice came from downstairs. Xiaohua's face turned cold. Looking up, it was the person who bid for the golden core cultivation method. Are you crazy? Without waiting for Xiaohua to open his mouth, Fu Jiwen scolded in sympathy. Fellow Taoist Xiao has already helped him bid for a gold core cultivation method. How can he repay kindness with enmity? Or perhaps his identity as a cultivator of the Dao sect has already been exposed, so he can't add insult to injury. Young Master Fu, you're using the wrong words to make things worse. You should be trying to create new problems. Xiaohua said coldly. That's right, that's right. Fu Jiwen chuckled. After chatting with Xiaohua for so long, Fu Jiwen felt like they were old friends at first sight. Unconsciously, he had already regarded Xiaohua as an old friend. He won't be bidding again soon, Xiaohua said indifferently. He raised his hand and said, 56 high-grade primordial stones. Immediately after, he muttered, could it be that this guy is blaming me for not helping him bid for the golden core cultivation method? Or do you think that I'm making fun of you? No matter what, you made me spend 2 high-grade primordial stones for nothing. Good, this fellow Taoist has increased the price. Fellow Taoist downstairs. Are you going to increase the price? Yu Linfeng appeared excited again, as if every increase in price could excite him. Just as Yu Linfeng was anticipating the increase in price, below the balcony, the cultivator who had just bid screamed for no reason, and then resisted the urge to say anything else. Fellow Taoist Xiao? Fu Jiwen's eyes darted around, looking at Xiao Hua as he said in a low voice. Using virtue to convince people, using virtue to convince people. Xiao Hua laughed mischievously. I've always advocated using virtue to convince people. Fellow Taoist, are you going to increase the price? Yu Linfeng was rather surprised, but he didn't have any other thoughts. After all, the Bright Moon Palace was surrounded by many experts from Star Plucking Tower, and they weren't afraid of others causing trouble. Since no one shouted to stop, it couldn't have been done by that mysterious senior upstairs. The Taoist cultivator who instigated the internal strife naturally wouldn't bid, and even the meddlesome people in the surroundings didn't dare to make a sound. Young Master Duanmu was even more bewildered as he looked at the similarly illusory window in front of him, thinking about something unknown. Good. Yu Linfeng's anticipated climax didn't come, and he could only somewhat dejectedly point his finger, and the jade slip slowly flew towards Xiao Hua's window. Seeing the jade slip fly towards him, Xiao Hua had the urge to use heaven and earth in the sleeve, as if only by holding this item in his hand would his heart be at ease. Of course, Xiao Hua's current magic power wasn't enough to support heaven and earth in the sleeve, and the current Xiao Hua didn't seem to be as impetuous as he was back in the Dawn Rain continent. He only looked, indifferently looked, and his eyes didn't move from the jade slip at all, as if he already had a card up his sleeve, and wasn't afraid of anyone coming to snatch it from him. It was as if he was completely certain that even if this jade slip was snatched away by someone, he would still be able to take it back. Unknowingly, Xiao Hua, who seemed to be a young lad, had already begun to transform, whether it was his temperament or bearing. Perhaps it was because of time, or perhaps it was because of a great change. In short, at this moment, Xiao Hua, who hadn't recovered much magic power, and whose divine abilities weren't even 30% of his peak, actually had a confidence he never had before. Xiao Hua took the jade slip and said, "Should this old man hand over the origin stones to you now?" Xiao Yi answered and entered, then hastily waved her hand and said, "Reporting to Senior, as long as there's a bid below a supreme-grade origin stone, Senior doesn't need to immediately hand over the origin stones. This is a kind of treatment for distinguished guests." "No need." Xiao Hua stretched out his hand, took out a supreme-grade origin stone, and handed it to Xiao Yi saying, "This kind of treatment doesn't have any practical meaning." Senior, you'll soon know the treatment for distinguished guests." Xiao Yi took the origin stone, pursed her lips and smiled, then lowered her head and left. "What kind of treatment do distinguished guests have?" Xiao Hua used his divine sense to enter the jade slip, carefully probing it, and asked Fu Jiwen again. Fu Jiwen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He spread out his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist, I'm just joking. This is the first time I've entered a distinguished guest's room. How could I know the treatment for distinguished guests?" However, after thinking for a moment, he probed again. "If it's the most obvious treatment, it might be when bidding for the last few treasures. After a certain price, the cultivators downstairs aren't allowed to bid. They're probably afraid that they can't afford the origin stones, so they're blindly shouting there." And Xiao Hua answered indifferently. Fu Jiwen couldn't clearly see Xiao Hua's appearance in the stardust, but he also understood that Xiao Hua was probing the water escape technique. After the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, Xiao Hua put the jade slip into the space, and handed it over to the green-robed Xiao Hua to comprehend. At this moment, Xiao Hua was really happy. Although this water escape technique wasn't a high-grade water escape technique like Yu Linfeng said, it was still a mid-grade water escape technique. After fusing with the water, it was an escape technique that relied on the water energy of heaven and earth to fly. In other words, as long as it was a place with water energy of heaven and earth, one could use this escape technique to fly. It wasn't like before where there was real water to be able to escape. As for the water avoidance technique from the West Sea, Xiao Hua had already finished comprehending it with the Buddha's Saraira. That technique was very strange, and required the so-called origin energy to be used. However, Xiaohua didn't know what origin energy was, so he couldn't test it out. Xiaohua closed his eyes for a moment, and pondered a little. He knew that although these two water escape techniques weren't of the same origin, the realms of the escape techniques were connected. If he finished cultivating the water avoidance technique, he could naturally continue to cultivate the mid-grade water escape technique. Oh right, isn't there someone in front of us who knows about origin energy? It's a waste not to ask. Xiaohua glanced at Fujiwen, who was also silently looking at the auction, and came to a realization. He hurriedly smiled and said, "Young Master Fu, I still have a question to ask. Fellow Taoist Xiao, why are you so polite? Please ask." Fujiwen hurriedly moved his gaze away from the window and said with a smile. Xiaohua said, "I would like to ask, what is origin energy? Is it the magic power of Confucian cultivators?" "Yes," Fujiwen said curiously. "Taoism is magic power, Buddhism is psychokinesis, Confucian cultivators are naturally origin energy. But why do some demons' cultivation techniques also mention origin energy?" Xiaohua asked curiously. "This is what I don't understand." "Oh, I understand," Fujiwen said with a smile. "Does fellow Taoist know about the 9 grades of origin energy and the 27th rank?" "I naturally know about this." Xiaohua nodded. "Then it's easy to explain." Fujiwen explained, because the 3 continents have magic power, psychokinesis, and origin energy. "Oh, I'm not very clear about the 1,000 demons sacred realm. This kind of classification is too heterogeneous. However, some cultivation techniques can be used regardless of magic power, psychokinesis, or origin energy. Therefore, Confucian cultivators use origin energy to refer to all magic power, psychokinesis, and origin energy." "So it's like that?" Xiaohua nodded and said, "These Confucian cultivators are really tyrannical. Origin energy is 9 grades. The substitution of origin energy is convenient for them. It can't be helped." Who asked the hidden immortal continent to have the most Confucian cultivators? Fujiwen smiled, then pointed outside the window and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, didn't you just say that you want to look for flying equipment? Now they have already started to bid for flying demonic beasts. Why don't you take a look?" "Okay," Xiaohua responded and looked outside the window. However, he was ecstatic in his heart. Since magic power can be used as origin energy, then when his magic power is fully recovered, he can naturally use the water escape technique. In other words, he can already use the complete 5 elements escape technique. His light escape technique cultivation has indeed taken a solid step. At this moment, in front of you Linfeng, there is a row of over 10 eggs of different sizes, which are also emitting different kinds of bewitching brilliance. The shape of these eggs is as strange as the halo. Some are oval, some are flat, some are gourd-shaped, and there are even some that are long. There are even some eggs that are faintly flickering, as if these eggs are lightly breathing. "These are demonic beast eggs?" Xiaohua squinted his eyes and asked Fujiwen in a low voice. Chapter 3288. Without waiting for Fujiwen to answer, Yu Linfeng unfolded his fan, and pretended to wave it a few times. He smiled and said, "What fellow immortals are looking at is naturally the eggs of the extremely precious birds and beasts of the 1,000 demons sacred realm. Everyone knows that the Confucian cultivators of the hidden immortal continent can't be compared to the demons of the 1,000 demons sacred realm. They can't rely on their physical bodies to fly long distances. They can only rely on flying tools and birds. Generally, flying tools requires primeval stones and primeval energy. Sometimes, it also consumes divine sense. Birds for transportation don't need to be so troublesome. As long as you communicate with them, you don't need to think too much. You can sleep and be taken away by the birds. What's more, a well-trained bird is a great help to us. They can also help you kill any evil cultivators you encounter. And these birds and flying beasts are best raised from young. Sign a blood contract with them before they hatch. If you erase the blood contract with the birds and flying beasts, then sign a new one. The bird's spirituality will disappear a lot. The eggs of the birds and flying beasts in front of me are all from the thousand demons' sacred realm. They weren't raised in captivity by the hidden immortal continent. Therefore, you don't need to worry about the spirituality of these birds and flying beasts after they hatch. Of course, if any fellow immortal is unlucky and can't hatch the eggs, or if the hatched demonic beast doesn't have spirituality, my Zhai Xinglu won't take responsibility. Ha ha ha. Yu Linfeng teased a few words. He flung his fan and said, the first egg is a cloud crane egg. The starting price is 5 high-grade primeval stones. 10 Following Yu Linfeng's words, the entire auction hall became lively again. After all, these flying beasts were commonly used. Many people came here for these eggs. How could they be patient? They hurriedly bid. That. Fellow Taoist Xiao Fujiwen stole a glance at Xiao Hua. Seeing that he didn't do anything, he said with a smile, I want one to bid for a wood-attributed green crane. I hope fellow Taoist Xiao can help me. Xiao Hua smiled and said, no problem, you can bid as much as you want, it's not what fellow Taoist Xiao thinks. Fujiwen said with some shame, Dao friend helped me bid for the thunder amplification wood, so I should have given all these high-grade primeval stones to Dao friend. However, I have been thinking that these upper-grade primordial stones are not enough to compensate fellow Taoist. I don't know how I can compensate or repay fellow Taoist. But now, I'm not paying attention to fellow Taoist's gift, and I'm bidding for the birds instead. All right, Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand. There's no need to mention this again. Just now, young Master Fu gave me a lot of pointers, and that's more than enough to repay him. Young Master Fu, you can bid as much as you want. There's no need to think too much about it. All right, Fujiwen sighed. Actually, the reason why I bid for the green crane is because I want to wait for my wife to escape and take her to travel the world. Escape? Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows, thinking that he had misheard, but Fujiwen seemed to have blurted it out. His face was a little embarrassed, and he immediately looked out the window, not saying another word. Since Fujiwen didn't say anything, Xiao Hua naturally wouldn't ask anymore. Soon, the price of the cloud crane egg reached 23 high-grade primordial stones, and it was bought by a cultivator downstairs. Following that, the fire snake, blue luan, cloud howl, chick yi shihong and other bird beasts were all bought by 20 or so high-grade primordial stones. Unfortunately, these bird beasts were not of the wood attribute. Fujiwen didn't say anything. Fujiwen, who always looked calm, was actually a little anxious. He stood in front of the windowsill and looked at the decreasing number of beast eggs. Fortunately, when the third last beast egg was auctioned, it was the wood attribute cloud crane that Fujiwen wanted, and he almost couldn't wait to bid. His bid didn't matter, but everyone was a little hesitant. After all, everyone had seen the bid for the water escape technique. Who would dare to compete with a virtuous senior? After a slight awkward silence, this cloud crane was actually bought by Fujiwen for 10 or so high-grade primordial stones. But at this critical moment, young Master Duanmu started to bid again. Moreover, he increased the price by 5 high-grade primordial stones twice, and still raised the price of this cloud crane to the height of 25 high-grade primordial stones. Xiao Hua sneered, and said in a low voice, This is young Master Duanmu telling me that this is the last time he will be lenient. From now on, the bridge will be the bridge, and the road will be the road. He won't let go again. The conflict from before. Hee, I'm afraid it can't be revealed. Did I ruin fellow Taoist's matter? Fujiwen hurriedly said. He really didn't think that much. How about, I give it to young Master Duanmu? How is that possible? Doing this is adding fuel to the fire. Xiao Hua shook his head. Don't be afraid of him. This has nothing to do with you. 26 high-grade primordial stones. I want to see. What will young Master Duanmu look like after he loses his mask? After Xiao Hua spoke, the entire auction house was silent. No one bid anymore. And the green crane egg flew to the window. Fujiwen took the green crane egg and carefully put it into the small Qiankuan bag. Looking at Fujiwen's relieved expression, Xiao Hua suddenly asked curiously, Young Master Fu, this small Qiankuan bag can store living things? Of course. Fujiwen didn't find Xiao Hua's ignorance strange at all, and said with a smile, Qiankuan, means to form a universe of its own. Of course it can store living things. But no matter if it's the small Qiankuan bag, the Qiankuan bag, or even the Qiankuan bangles, they can't store living things for long periods of time. After a certain period of time, the living things have to come out for air. In the following few bids, other than the remaining beast eggs, there were even a dozen young beasts. Although Xiaohua hadn't seen these young beasts before, he wasn't interested in them. He had a lot of strange things in his space, and every one of them was more powerful than these young beasts. He wouldn't spend primordial stones for no reason. After the time it took to eat a meal, Yu Linfeng finally finished processing the young beasts. Then, he looked at the last golden ball of light on the outline of the Thousand Demons' sacred realm, took a deep breath, and said loudly, "Fellow immortals, you should all know that every time my Bright Moon Palace bids for rare items, we leave the 3 most valuable items behind. The next item to bid is one of them." Swoosh! Once Yu Linfeng said this, everyone held their breaths and looked at the golden ball of light with rapt attention. They didn't even want to breathe loudly, and quietly listen to Yu Linfeng's analysis. They really wanted to know what it was. This item Yu Linfeng didn't even take the item and said, "This item is only for the VIPs on the 3rd floor. As for the other immortals, I'm sorry, you don't have the qualifications to bid." Fellow immortal Yu. Just as Yu Linfeng finished speaking, someone naturally wasn't convinced. He jumped up and said, "I know the rules of Star Picking Tower very well. When the price of a rare item is set, only the VIPs on the 3rd floor are qualified to bid. But this item hasn't even revealed its base price yet, so we're not allowed to bid? Could it be? This item's base price has already exceeded at this point." The cultivator seemed to have understood something and couldn't close his mouth. This was the first time he heard that the Bright Moon Palace bid for an item with a base price of more than 10 top-grade source stones. It's not just the base price. Yu Linfeng waved his hand and sighed. Even if you have enough source stones to bid, you still have to consider whether you have the strength to protect this item, whether you have the life to protect this item. Many people sucked in a breath of cold air. With a wave of Yu Linfeng's hand, the golden light slowly flew closer. The golden light was blazing. Although it hadn't revealed its true appearance, the indescribable heat was like the scorching sun, and it already made everyone in the Bright Moon Palace feel anxious and thirsty. A feeling of difficulty arose in everyone's hearts. Unconsciously, everyone slightly narrowed their eyes, but the desire in their eyes was even more intense than the scorching sun. They stared fixedly at the light, wanting to know just how rare this item was. When the light landed in front of Yu Linfeng, it was actually dozens of feet wide. It was clear that Yu Linfeng didn't dare to approach the light, and had already flown to the top of the Bright Moon Palace. At the same time, wisps of blue mist emerged from all over the Bright Moon Palace like clouds, enveloping everyone in front of it and blocking the heat. Rise! Yu Linfeng clapped his hands and a rare imperial artifact that looked like an ink brush came out of his sleeves. He let out a roar like spring thunder, and reached out his hand. The brush was about to throw towards the golden light. Wait! Just at this moment, an extremely loud and clear voice that was even more shocking than muffled thunder came from the windowsill on Xiaohua's left. Even someone as strong as Xiaohua's mind was shaken by this voice. Xiaohua couldn't help sucking in a breath of cold air, and looked to his left in disbelief. This window, it seems like there hasn't been a bid. There hasn't even been a sound, right? It seems like their goal is this golden item. When Yu Linfeng heard this voice, his body naturally trembled, and the ink brush remained in his hand. However, Yu Linfeng's face didn't reveal the slightest bit of displeasure. He cupped his hands and said, "Senior upstairs, may I say something? There's no need to open this item." That voice was very imposing, and in people's ears, it seemed to resonate in their hearts. There was an inconceivable power that made people submit from the bottom of their hearts. "Yes, this little one understands." Yu Linfeng actually agreed, and withdrew his hand, putting the ink brush back into his sleeve. Cough, cough. A clear coughing sound appeared at this time, and a ball of green light floated from the night sky of the Bright Moon Palace. Within the light, Zhu Qing had already changed into green clothes, and slowly flew down like a student rushing to take the exam. When Yu Linfeng saw Zhu Qing, he immediately sweated profusely. His usually calm expression was replaced with panic, and he hastily bowed and said, "Tower Lord, this subordinate, and you can go down." Zhu Qing didn't talk to Yu Linfeng as warmly as she talked to Xiao Hua. Just a few words made Yu Linfeng feel a chill in his heart. He didn't dare to ask anything, and hastily floated down from the sky. However, he still didn't dare to approach the golden light, and followed the edge of the bright moon palace to stand in the shadows. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.